This is mine. I wish I did. I'd give it to you. Oh, look.
Yeah. We're talking.
Mm-mm.
E-copy of it? Email, isn't there an email copy of it? I guess you get it open.
Yeah, I did.
Go into the web. And that's good. Anybody else?
Oh, it was there for building.
I've got one.
No comment, Tim. Oh,
Not.
thank you.
Get organized. Ready? All right, it is now 5:30 and we are convening to review the budget of the city of the Dalles. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Scott Randall,
Present.
Darcy Long. Present. McLaughlin,
Present.
Dan Richardson,
Present.
Dan Oldenburg,
Present.
Allison Schock. Present. Karina Smith,
I'm here.
Ken Ring.
Here.
Sandy Hakerl.
Here.
Rod Runyon is absent. And Mayor Mays is also absent.
All right, thank you. Our first action is to elect a chair and secretary. Do I have any nominations?
I would now nominate Councillor McLaughlin as the chair.
Other nominations? Hearing none. I guess I do have one issue that if our budget process enters into the third night, which is Wednesday night, I will be attending the state Lions Convention in Brandon, Oregon. So I won't be able to be here in person, but I could, if it continues to the Wednesday night, I could Zoom in, but that means I would ask for someone to fill my position, provided that I'm voted as your chairperson. All right. With that being said, we have a nomination. Do we have any other nominations? Hearing none. Do we need to go ahead and do a vote, quick vote?
I'll make a second.
Yes. Second, we have a second. Thank you. And do we have any other discussion? All right, not hearing any discussion. All in favor of Timothy McLaughlin being your chair, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Sounds unanimous. So here we go. Buckle up. So, first thing is to review our, yes. Oh, that's right. Let's get a secretary, please. Do I have nominations? Thank you. That's what I was, yes. Do we have nominations for secretary?
You're Abigail.
Do we have nominations?
Chair, what are the duties of the secretary?
Do
Sign the minutes.
Sign the minutes.
sign the minutes.
Happy to do it.
All right. We have Darcy said that she would be like,
To nominate.
and we have a nomination for Darcy to be the secretary. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none. Let's get a second on that.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a second on the floor. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of Darcy being the secretary, state yay or raise your hand.
Yay.
All right,
Hey, Darcy.
settled. All right, excellent. Let's go on now. We have a secretary. Now we need the budget message, and I would assume that would be our city manager, Matthew Klebs.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here this evening. I just wanted to open with a couple of housekeeping items before diving into the message that was included in your proposed budget book. The bathrooms are down the stairs to the right, and the code is 7277. So just wanted to share that. Also included on the dais this evening are some additional pages to be swapped out in your books. One of the things we try and do is have the most up-to-date information. And so those pages include just a few additional changes that we will be sure to highlight as we go through the budget. They are noted in gray, and we'll be sure to call those out. One of the things I wanted to mention right out of the gate, and as well as changes to what are called budget issue papers. There is one budget issue paper in the back of the book for this year, which primarily highlights some of the staffing changes that we have. In years prior, there have been several different budget issue papers, and a lot of that information will either be covered in the specific department report or in the opening information that we'll be covering shortly. So I just wanted to note that change in practice. And so to kick us off, as I go through, I'll try and refer to the different page numbers as we work through the different sections of the budget. But right out of the gate, there's the budget message where I try to highlight some of the results of our city council goal setting session that we had last November, along with some of the different guiding policies or guiding fiscal policies that we use when we're preparing these budgets. And so last fall in November, we brought in a facilitator, Sarah Singer Wilson, who had an all-day session with the city council to identify the overarching goals and priority projects over the course of the next year. The resulting document from that session is right after my budget message, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have from that document. But overall, the primary areas that we were focusing on are livability, housing, houselessness, fiscal sustainability, and long-term infrastructure. And our facilitator really tried to encourage us to focus on the top 4 or top 5 issues. And, with the mantra that if everything is a priority, nothing is. But it wanted to emphasize that some of these other supporting areas are equally important when going through that process. And those include the robust workforce that we have here, a secure and modern IT department, and an overarching philosophy for economic development. As noted in my budget message, you'll see some of those guiding policies that help the creation of this document, including maintaining an unappropriated ending fund balance equal to 4 months of our net operating expenses, a general fund contingency of at least 10%, 5-year capital improvement plans, and calculating our administrative transfers amongst some of our various departments based on the services that they actually receive. Going through each of the goals on the subsequent pages, I wanted to focus on number 1, livability, and enhancing public safety through our police department, making sure that there's adequate support for staff as well as training. We recently finished a new contract with the revamped, I guess I should say, the Columbia Gorge Humane Society, which replaced Home at Last. And this contract, new contract with CGHS is a relatively substantial increase given the prior contract that we have. But we're confident that the services we're securing will really benefit and allow the Animal Control Department to be responsive to the constituent needs throughout our community. We are also continuing to work and are very, very close to finalizing a new and updated IGA with the Wasco County Library District. We had a very robust discussion a couple weeks ago at the County Commission meeting, and we've been engaged with the Library Service District and the Library Board to bring that across the finish line, which I'm very confident we will in the coming weeks. Also included in this budget are support for various downtown amenities, such as new benches and trash cans at the recommendation of our Beautification and Tree Committee. And these will complement the newly installed downtown street trees. And we are, if we haven't finished already, we are very, very close to finishing refurbishing the holiday decorations that we put up every year on the streetlights in the downtown in partnership with Northern Wasco County Parks and Rec. We have welcome signs at the roundabout and over by the fish bridge, I guess we could refer it to. And on the backside of those signs, we'll be completing a process to put up departure slogans, I guess you could call them, as people leave the community. The backside of those signs are blank. I'm very thankful, knock on wood, that they haven't been tagged. We'll be putting up some slogans highlighting some of the unique aspects that we have here. And so I'm excited to see that come about in the coming months. The second goal that we had here was housing supply. We'll be working and have started efforts around a housing production strategy as required by the state of Oregon, building on our housing needs analysis, as well as some capital projects to reduce the barriers to housing development, as well as downtown revitalization. Houselessness, the Gloria Center has been completed with financial support from the city, and we continue to engage with Mid-Columbia Community Action Council, as well as Mid-Columbia Center for Living to coordinate and provide robust services to serve those in need. And then the fourth goal around fiscal sustainability. One of the big conversations that we'll be having over the course of this next year is council and partner level discussion around the use and overarching philosophies around the use of potential tax abatement dollars, most notably from the Strategic Investment Program. We just actually had this morning a very productive meeting with the state in finalizing the revised state office building lease, which has been well in the works for about a year and a half or so, if not longer. And we'll hope to see that come to fruition in the next few months. This budget also includes some proposed uses around a grant and loan package for the Columbia Gorge Regional Airport for the development of some additional T hangars for the different aircraft that we have here. This will create a new or additional revenue sources for the airport and contribute to its fiscal sustainability. And then the last section here on my budget message around long-term infrastructure and planning. We'll be continuing a transfer or proposed transfer to the street department from the general fund and the amount of $750,000 with the objective of maintaining the pavement management index pavement management index level that we have for our street department and prioritizing and providing that support to maintaining our roads. Again, similar to the preliminary work we've had around the housing production strategies, we've also had a kickoff with our water master plan. This is a 20-year plan that guides the use of water revenue, system development charges, and the infrastructure projects that we need to provide that critical service to our constituents. This update to the water master plan will also be followed by a wastewater master plan update in the coming year. And finally, in last year's budget, we had a significant transfer into the capital improvement fund for city facilities, not only City Hall and the police department, but also some of the city-owned infrastructure that we see throughout our community, including the dock, the Lewis and Clark Park, downtown roundabout, and other amenities. And so we're continuing to budget funds for a transfer into that capital improvement plan to support those long-term needs. And that complements and aligns quite well with 5-year capital improvement plan and is in a similar vein to the 20-year master plans that we have to make sure that we have those adequate resources available to continue providing the services that we do. And so last but not least, I wanted to thank you all for being here this evening, for volunteering your time and commitment to your community. And I also wanted to thank all the staff and department heads that worked on pulling this budget together. Most notably, of course, Angie Wilson to my left with the finance department. This is a very lengthy document indeed, following on the heels. It always seems to be either going into audit, coming out of audit, going into budget, coming out of budget. And so it represents a lot of work, a lot of effort to pull that all together. So I just want to express my gratitude to them as well. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on those initial pages in your budget book, the budget officer's message, and the city council work plan.
All right, we've now completed item number 4 on our agenda. We're moving on to 5. We need to receive a motion to certify City of the Dalles tax rate of $30155 per thousand of assessed value. So we need to get a motion. Correct? Yep.
Question.
Chair, I'll move to,
What was it last year?
What was it last year, Tim?
It was the same rate.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to certify the City of the Dalles tax rate of 3.0155 per 1,000 of assessed value.
And do I have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, well, moving on to number 6. At this time, now is the time scheduled for a public hearing to receive testimony concerning the possible uses of state revenue sharing funds for the City of the Dalles 2024-2025 fiscal year. Public hearings are required by Oregon law and certain rules apply. First, I will ask the budget officer to expand on the description of state shared revenue found on page 17 of your proposed budget book. Next, I will ask the committee if it has any questions. After those questions, or if there are none, I will open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Any person may testify in support of, in opposition to, or in any other way directly related to the possible use of state shared revenue. After all interested parties are afforded an opportunity to testify, I will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Finally, the committee will then deliberate if needed, and I will accept motions. These are the rules. Are there any questions? Hearing none. Mr. Klebs.
Good evening. Angie Wilson, the finance director for the city. The League of Oregon Cities produces an annual report each year with the estimated state shared revenues.
I'm
And
not certain that your mic, would you check to see if your mic is turned on?
I
Or
think
pull it a little
yeah,
bit.
Okay,
Oh,
can you
there
hear
you
me
go.
now? Okay.
Thank you.
So we receive 5 different areas for the state shared revenue: the highway trust funds, marijuana, 911, cigarette, and liquor taxes. And these are basic services and community needs. Typically, annually, every year, they have gone into the general fund.
All right. Thank you. Does the committee have any questions for Ms. Wilson? All right. Does anyone wish to testify in support of, in opposition to, or any other way directly related to the possible uses of state shared revenue? Seeing or hearing none, the public testimony portion of this hearing is now closed. Does the committee feel it has enough information to make a decision? If so, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Yes. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
It would be an appropriate motion if any committee members are unsure about what kind of motion would be appropriate here, to keep it as general as possible. Something like moving to recommend to the city council that state shared revenue be used for general fund expenditures would be an appropriate motion to make.
All right, hearing that.
I'll take a crack at it,
Okay,
Mr.
good.
Chair. I would move that we authorize and direct staff to take in state shared revenue and apply it to the general fund as per previous years.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor of accepting this motion signify by saying aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none. All right. I think we have completed that portion. Then we'll move on. Okay. Public hearings we just completed. Oh, I need to go on. We're going to swap the order of the public hearing. We're going to go public hearing to receive testimony regarding use of state revenue sharing. So A and B are going to be reversed, correct?
Correct. And that's what we just accomplished. So we'll be moving on to testimony regarding the proposed budget.
All right. Well, we have number 7. If we're going to go in order of the agenda, do we need to set future meetings?
Okay.
I'm looking at 6. We've just completed.
Mr. Chair,
6A.
it looks like the committee just completed item
6A?
6B.
Oh,
And so 6A, which as you've
Oh, I
indicated, should be flipped. 6A should be now, and that, as the city manager just mentioned, it's a public hearing to receive testimony regarding the proposed budget.
all right. And do we take any kind of, does this require a motion or do we just accept testimony?
I believe that the city clerk provided a script
Yes.
for agenda item number 6B. You should have it on the dais. If you don't have it, I have it here in front of
No,
me
I
as
don't.
well.
No, I don't see it here. Thank you. Now, didn't I just read? No, this is different than the one I have.
Yes.
All right. So you'd like me to read the top again?
Yes, please.
All right, we'll do that. Now is a time scheduled for public hearing to receive testimony concerning the proposed budget for the city of the Dalles 2024-25 fiscal year. Public hearings are required by Oregon law and certain rules apply. First, I will ask the budget officer and their staff to present the proposed budget book. To expedite the process, committee members may ask questions of the budget officers or staff at this time. After those questions, or if there are none, I will open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Any person may testify in support of, in opposition to, or in any way directly related to the proposed budget. After all interested persons are afforded an opportunity to testify, I will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Finally, the committee will then deliberate if needed, and we will accept motions. These are the rules. Are there any questions? Now we have just completed the portion. Where do we move from here?
Mr. Chair, if there are no questions, you can proceed to the first arrow
First arrow.
on that same page.
Well, that asks me to turn it over to report. That's the first arrow.
Maybe it says to bang your gavel.
Not President Biden, I'm sorry. All right. Bang the gavel. Mr. Cleaves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just hold on one moment, please.
I will.
We're reviewing a comment about the state shared revenue motion that we just took. So if I can have one moment.
Yep.
Thank you.
Are we on track?
We will be on track. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The comment that was made a moment ago regarding the state shared revenue is that the revenue we discussed generally goes into the general fund, as noted, except for the highway trust funds revenue, which goes directly into the street fund. And so my apologies there that the motion did not capture that aspect of it. And so we will need to go back and rescind and remotion
Oh,
for state shared revenues. We can do that now if you would like,
I
or.
think so.
Okay,
And that's the reason that we're going back and backtracking.
correct.
I
correct.
understand. All right. So now we need to know if the committee has any questions for Mr. Klebe or Mrs. Wilson before we get started. If not, who's first up?
So just to clarify, Mr. Chair, we'll be going back to the state shared revenue motion that was made. And I believe what we'll be looking for is a motion from the panel here or the committee tonight to rescind the prior motion. And we'll have that pass. And then we'll need to re-motion state shared revenue with the highway trust funds going directly into the street funds and the remaining state shared revenue components going into the general fund.
And if I'm not mistaken, it needs to be the maker of the original motion.
It needs to be rescinded, apparently.
Correct. But the person who can rescind it is the person who made the original motion.
That was Dan, Council Richardson.
No good deed. All right.
All right. Well, we want to do this right.
Correct.
Let me take a second go at this, Mr. Chairman, if you would.
All right.
I move we rescind my previous motion, and I further move that we accept state shared revenue from cigarette tax, marijuana and liquor revenues and into the general fund, and direct staff to portion of the highway trust funds revenue into the
Street fund.
street fund.
And would the counselors also add the 911 revenue into the general fund?
And in addition, put the 911 revenue into the general fund.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, we need to go ahead and vote. All in favor of passing this motion, please signify by raising your hand or saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, any abstentions? Then the motion passes. All right, we have completed the public testimony. I see that we have agenda A and B now that I missed the first one.
Correct.
Now, where do we proceed?
So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we are at public hearing to receive testimony regarding the proposed budget.
All right, and that's where we move into starting with the budget presentations by staff.
Well, actually, that is later in our agenda.
Okay, well, then I will go back and number 7 is set future meetings. Correct? All right.
We're still doing 6A, aren't we?
Well, we completed. Did we skip
It's
6?
6B, but we haven't done 6A.
All right, well, let's go back and pick up 6A, public hearing to receive testimony regarding uses of state revenue sharing.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
6A used to be proposed budget.
Right?
You just mentioned was state revenue sharing. I believe that the committee has disposed of that question.
All right, good.
So now the only matter before the committee is agenda item 6B, but it's used to be what's on your paper is 6A. And so with some certainty, now is the
Right.
time for a public hearing to receive testimony regarding the proposed budget. The intent behind this public hearing is to capture the staff presentations that you mentioned, as well as the setting of the future meetings and everything. And it won't be over until, well, it won't be over tonight. The
No.
intent of this hearing will go on until a motion is made at the conclusion of all the staff presentations. And it's upon the motion language that I've recommended, or at least recommended as appropriate at the bottom of that script, which could be made tomorrow night if you all are very diligent and staff hustles.
Right.
Or perhaps even Wednesday night. So this hearing will be open till this tonight's meeting is recessed and committee reconvenes tomorrow.
Does say that in the footnotes on my,
Yes.
all right.
And so if it's not terribly inconvenient, I would prefer if you could just start from the top. Just
Of public hearings
yes. No, just start on the top of that page and just now is the time and just
again?
yeah, I would like to insist on it just to make
Let
sure
me
that we
make
don't have
sure.
to do
I
this
have
again in 6 months.
Agenda item 6B and agenda item 6A. Which one?
The one that says proposed budget, underlined at the very top. You can throw away the other one that says regarding uses of state revenue share.
All right.
In fact, I would insist on it.
Oh,
Come take it from you. Actually,
yeah, come get it from me, will you?
I'll just take this.
All right, and I'm going to read this one more time. Now. Oh, good thing I listened in class when I was learning to read. Now is the time scheduled for a public hearing to receive testimony concerning the proposed budget for the city of the Dalles 2024-2025 fiscal year. Public hearings are required by Oregon law and certain rules apply. First, I will ask the budget officer and their staff to present the proposed budget book. To expedite the process, committee members may ask questions of the budget officer or staff at any time. After those questions, or if there are none, I will open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Any person may testify in support of, in opposition to, or in any other way directly related to the proposed budget. After all interested persons are afforded an opportunity to testify, I will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Finally, the committee will then deliberate if needed, and I will accept motions. These are the rules. If there are any questions, or are there any questions? All right.
So now we'll move on to the next section on the agenda, which is setting future meeting dates. And then we will approve the minutes, and then we'll begin the budget presentations.
All right. Now we're on track. Boy, that was difficult. All right.
Oh, thank you.
We need to set future meeting dates. Tomorrow night is our next proposed continuation of this, if we should not finish, and probably will never. In all the years I've been here, we've not finished on the first night. And if it requires, then there would be the next night after, which would be Wednesday. All right. So those are the future meeting dates. Everyone in agreement? We don't need to take. Do we need a consensus? Do we need a motion?
But we're all set for the meeting nights this week. Do you want to set a target date for recessing tonight's meeting?
Target date would be tomorrow night.
Target time, I'm sorry.
5:30 p.m.
And then tonight you want to go till?
Normally we go to, it's like 8 o'clock, but I think 8:30 would be the line. I think it's by regulation. Is normally in the past for meetings, if we don't finish by a certain time, then we have to get approval by consensus to expand or extend that. Is that applying to the budget process?
No.
No. Okay. So, yes,
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
yes.
I believe we have a noticed executive session for 8 PM tonight. Is that correct?
It'll be tomorrow night.
Tonight? Okay.
Okay, then that takes
Tomorrow night.
care of that tomorrow night. So let's, everyone in agreement, 8 o'clock seems like a time. If we need to at 8 o'clock, if we're close, then what we'll do is we'll debate, and then we may extend it, or probably we'll come back tomorrow evening, 5:30, same location. All right. Now, approval of the minutes. We don't have any minutes for tonight, so we'll just move on. As needed, not until tomorrow. Tonight's minutes will be emailed in the morning for review, then approved tomorrow. All right. We're on to number 9. That was, all right. Budget presentation by fund. We're on A, general fund.
Correct. And I'd like to ask Finance Director Angie Wilson to kick us off. Oh, and if I may, not to steal your thunder, but one thing I wanted to make note to the budget committee is we do have a handy whiteboard over on the left. I always need to have a whiteboard somewhere in the room. Nick will be assisting us over there, and that will be what we call the parking lot. So if there are particular items to discuss later, or we just want to make note of them for potential future discussion, we can put them in the parking lot to be revisited, and that way we can continue to move forward. So I just wanted to make note of that. Thank you.
So to start the budget, we're going to go to the city overview. And the first page that we'll start at is page 2 in your budget, and that is the organizational flow chart. This organizational flow chart plays a very vital role within the city. It gives the public insights into internal hierarchy, and it is also the decision-making processes on how it goes down. And then on page 3 would be the city of the Dalles. Just kind of giving a little bit of history regarding the city. The Dalles is one of Oregon's most historic cities. It was known earlier in the history as the end of the Oregon Trail. In accordance with the city charter in 1899, which was revised in 2017 and amended in 2020, the city of the Dalles is governed by the city council. This council consists of an elected mayor and 5 council members. The city operates under a council manager form of government. Our economic conditions, and this is how we budgeted this year, and we went through the League of Oregon Cities, and that's by our estimated population. We have an estimated population this year of 16,417. The city serves as a trading area of about 70,000 persons in both Oregon and Washington. Major agricultural products of the city are wheat and sweet cherries, with a growing sector of grape production. The Dalles is a primary producer of both domestic and overseas cherry markets. There are in excess of 13,000 acres of sweet cherry trees around the city. Wheat has roughly about 50,000 acres. The city is a strategic home base for the year-round recreation. Water sports enthusiasts will find boating, excellent fishing, windsurfing, kiteboarding are in the United States of the Columbia River, probably the highest. There's also camping, biking, fishing, hiking, and sightseeing. On page 5 is the budget process overview. The budget process overview is something that I reviewed with the budget committee members earlier on a couple months ago. Local budget law is designed to establish a standard procedure for preparing, presenting, and administering the budget of Oregon's local government. This process encourages citizens' involvement in the preparation of the budget before its final adoption. The goal is to provide in good faith a method of estimating revenues, expenditures, and proposed taxes. Establishing a budget provides the local government with a method for control of revenues and expenditures that promote efficiency and economy when using public funds. What the citizens can expect from this process is that we did all of our notifications of our meetings. We encourage public comment and input. And there's also verbal and written testimony that can be submitted for the hearings. You can also review the budget documents within the City of the Dalles website, and there's electronic copies that are available. We are required to prepare the proposed budget, notice it in the papers, conduct at least one public meeting. We notice a public hearing and summary of the approved budget, and the budget committee will approve the budget by the end of this budget process. And if you turn to page 6 is the budget calendar, which I believe all of you have seen. And as you see the preparation and then the proposed and approval for May, and in June we'll come back with the city council and we will adopt the budget, and then we'll implement the budget in July, and that will be the first day of our new fiscal year. And Matthew will be going over the financial overview.
And so if you haven't picked up already, Angie and I will kind of bounce back and forth as we move through the budget, each taking different sections. But please interrupt us if you have any questions. And so turning to page 8, we have a revenue overview section, and just briefly touch upon some of the different types of revenue streams that the city has, starting with taxes, namely from property tax, but also some of the other taxes we muddled our way through a moment ago. Fees, licenses, and permits, charges for service, intergovernmental revenue, fines and forfeitures, miscellaneous other, interfund transfers, and other funding sources, including pass-through transfers and debt proceeds. These are some of the buckets and some of the terms that you will hear throughout this budget presentation. Turning to page 9, first and foremost, I wanted to talk about franchise fees. Franchise fees are a fee that the city charges for different entities who make use of our right-of-way. Most notably, and what you see on the pie chart included on page 9 is Northern Wasco PUD, Public Utility District. But we also have franchise agreements for other users of our right-of-way, such as telecom and internet service providers, the Dalles Disposal. And this is something that staff has been looking at over the course of the last year. We have a number of franchise agreements that are getting quite up there in age, and some of them are reaching their term. And so we're going through a process to review the franchise agreements that we have, the terms and conditions under which they've been applied, as well as finalizing franchise agreements with right-of-way users that we currently don't have. And so this has been one of those priority items that staff has been dedicating some time on. As you'll see, Northern Wasco County PUD is the lion's share of the franchise revenues that we receive. This is resulting from the growth that they've seen, the gross sales that they have, and the city's charge associated as such. And so this has been steadily increasing in recent years and is expected to continue. On page 9, we highlight some of the property taxes that we collect. As we noted a moment ago, 3.0155 per thousand. We typically budget for a 93% collection rate. This is considering some that may be in appeal with the Board of Property Tax Appeals or going through some other process. One of the approaches that we have here is to try and budget conservative on revenue, just a good practice to go through. That's what we applied here. As you see on the line graph on page 10, there was a little bit of an uptick on that line graph. Not entirely, but predominantly, that was one of the enterprise zone abatements ending. And so we have 2 other enterprise zone agreements in place, as well as the strategic investment program. On the next page, page 11, there is what used to be a budget issue paper that I created when I was assistant to the city manager many years ago. And this information has continued on. This tries to capture, or does capture, the uses of fee dollars generated by the 2 remaining enterprise zone agreements that we have. Again, this is with Design LLC. And so this details some of the uses and how those funds have been used by the city, distributed to the community from both the initial payments as well as the annual payments that we've been receiving from those 2 enterprise zone agreements. These are very distinct and separate from the relatively recent agreement that we entered into under a strategic investment program. And one of the budget sheets that we handed out today, one of the corrections was we just received the initial payment just last week from the first data center that's still under construction. So that's very recent news. That's the initial payment component of the strategic investment program. That's a one-time payment of $3 million that we split with the city and county. And so that check came in just last week, and we try and provide you with the most up-to-date information as possible, which is an example of why we switched out some of those pages. I'll pause there for a moment to see if there are any questions on the enterprise zone information. Going on to page 14, another significant source of revenue is our transient room tax. In essence, the city of the Dalles has a tax rate of 8%, broken down into 6% and 2%. And 2% is allocated in support of Northern Wasco County Parks and Rec. And 6% is used to support various programs we have in the community, and most notably, as required by state law for the use of tourism services and tourism facilities. And so we'll get into that in just a moment. You'll see on page 15, again, trying to add some graphics to show some of these trend lines. We see kind of coming out of the COVID era, unfortunately, we have a little bump in TRT, or significant bump, I should say, in TRT. And we've seen that continue to grow at a modest rate over the most recent years. And then on page 16 is the proposed Dalles Area Chamber of Commerce tourism budget. This was a presentation that was given to the city council a couple weeks ago, the marketing plan for this required use, or the required use of TRT and tourism services. And I wanted to make particular note in this budget, it's providing information all the way back from 2019 to 2020. And I wanted to note that the categories that have an asterisk next to them on the right are the ones that saw an increase from the prior year budget. So the other line items there have remained flat. And those increases are either predominantly 3%. One of them is 5% noted on that budget. I'm assuming, I haven't even looked, but I'm assuming that Lisa from the chamber is here in the audience behind me. And I'm sure she can answer some additional questions if I am unable to. And I'll pause there for a moment. And so I will skip over state shared revenues, as we just spoke about that one. And looking back on my notes, I did want to note that that is also an additional discussion item and work item over the course of this next year. Staff is I'm intending to engage with the city council to have a discussion around the vision or uses and presence of tourism in our community, and what we may want to see, what we want to see going forward as the tourism industry grows. That will help feed and guide some updates to the TRT ordinance that we have, which will ultimately guide our selection and procurement of tourism services and how we support different tourism facilities. And so in addition, as I noted a couple minutes ago, around the efforts around water master plan and housing production strategy, over the next few months, we'll be having some discussion at the council level around those elements of transient room tax. Like I mentioned, we'll skip over state shared revenues and jump to page 18, which is the major expenditures. There's a lot of information here. Again, some broad brushstrokes. We have major expenditure categories in personal services, material and services, capital outlay, capital projects, interfund transfers, debt service, and contingency. These are all terms that will crop up throughout the budget process. And please, if you have any questions on them, we're here to serve. Some of the things I wanted to note in these subsequent pages, and the HR director may speak more about them, is tracking some of the trend lines we have when it comes to property and healthcare costs. The premiums, we're starting to see some very significant increases in those areas. So that's something that we want to track. That's demonstrated on page 20 and 21. Again, trying to provide those trend lines to kind of show you the growth and impact over time, and as well as page 22. And what I wanted to in particular note on page 22 is that our experience rating is still below a 1. And so that represents some of the hard work by the HR department as well as our safety officer. We had a higher trend line there in the beginning, and we're trying to bring that down and keep it as low as possible. Page 23, we have FTE schedules. This again shows some additional information as to how the staff here at the city is broken out amongst the different departments, as well as the growth in some of those departments. And so in recent years, we've added positions at the police department, as well as in economic development in our facilities department. This year, we have some additional positions proposed, again, noted in the budget bit at the back of the book. But in particular, I wanted to mention that we have a additional codes position, another position in water distribution, as well as the library, and some increases to full FTE for our paralegal, as well as or evidence tech. Thank you very much. And so you'll see that in 24, 25, those additional increases there. And then I think I will be handing it over to Angie for the budget overview, which begins on page 27.
This budget is for the annual budget period beginning July 1 of 2024 and ending in June 30th of 2025. The budget was prepared in accordance to Oregon local budget law and city council's financial policies. The proposed budget is a balanced budget that allocates available resources to maintain targeted levels of service. The proposed budget for the general fund for fiscal year 2025 is $16,538,447, which reflects a decrease of $2,451,000 and from the prior year adopted budgets. And the total resources are down lower compared to the previous year with the beginning fund balance. As you guys remember, last year we moved quite a substantial amount of our money that was in the reserve for future expenditure over to the capital projects fund. So you will see that increase in the beginning fund balance this year when we're looking and reviewing the capital project fund. And for the total expenditures, you'll see by the department for each one of those departments, you can see the amount that we propose for the budget, and each department head will be going through each of their budgets individually. So I'll kind of just skip over that for right now. And then at the end for the total other uses, our special payments, our debt services, transfers out, contingency, and unappropriated ending fund balance will be something that we will review later, but we do try to maintain a 10% contingency in the general fund with also having a balance for unappropriated ending fund balance this year of $1,842,616. And then if you'll turn to page 28, we will be going over the council supported programs Matthew will talk about.
So we'll also touch upon this in greater detail when we get to the city council's budget itself. But this page serves as a one pager for a relatively new process where different organizations can come to the city with a request for funding. This has been done in years past, but this year in particular, we set a firm deadline at the end of January to entertain such proposals. Years prior, we've gotten some requests very late in the process, and it's been difficult to incorporate that in review. And so included on this summary page here are all the different funding requests that we received both before and after that date. And so I will note that we did receive a request for funding support for pickleball. That's not on this chart. That was for $20,000. And the safe space request came in after January 31st. But what I'm really trying to provide here is the complete picture to the budget committee of all the funding requests that we received. In the city council's budget itself, you'll have the recommended funding allocations decided through the process that we've been going through. And that's what will actually end up in the budget worksheets. But again, trying to provide all the information possible with every funding request that we received. And so I might pause there for a moment to see if there's any particular questions on these programs. Otherwise, we'll dive deeper in during the city council department presentation. Okay.
I do have a question on this. The Dalles Arts Center, this is the first year that they now are in the black, which is great. They have always borrowed, or we've given them money to stay afloat, but they're doing pretty well now. So maybe we should at some point look at, it's only 15,000, but we might be able to use that in a way to support them, but through special projects that they may do for us. Rather than giving them money, maybe they would be able to help in the beautification of the city?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're perfectly aligned with what with the relationship that we have is set up with the Dalles Art Center. The funding that we provide to them is not for general operating support. It's for a scope of work and project deliverables. And
Great.
so there's been a number of those, or a few of those over the years. There was what's called a People's Forge project, where they created a piece of art through volunteer labor from the community. I believe during Cherry Festival, it was a couple of years ago. And that piece of art is actually at the art center itself. And they've been coordinating with our facilities supervisor to actually have that installed down at the Lewis and Clark Park. And then one of the particular projects we'll be engaged with over the course of the next year is availing us, the city, of some of their expertise and resources when it comes to the murals at the roundabout. And so one of the services they can assist us with, for example, is going through a call for artists and using their network, their experience to essentially put out an RFP to artists who may want to engage the murals around the roundabout and see what could be done there. There's a number of murals there, believe it or not. They are extremely faded.
Correct, but I thought that the city wanted them to fade because they were a distraction to the drivers. This is something that I had heard through one of the city employees, and so they didn't want to do that again. And so maybe there's going to be a change in that roundabout in regards to a different look.
Well, I mean, with any kind of project that we'll take on the roundabout, for example, we'll be coordinating and engaging with our public works department to make sure it actually doesn't distract individuals from going around there. But it wasn't my understanding that the murals were intentionally left to fade. I've heard that comment before. And I think it goes in line with some of the philosophy I have is, if we're going to have something, we should take care of it and make it nice. And if we're not going to have it, we should paint over the murals in white paint, for example, and not just let them fade and appear unattended to and not taken care of. And so I think with the contract with the Art Center, and this is just one example of a project that they'll undertake over the course of the next year, let's explore what it would look like to bring those back and how we could do that and have it be an asset to the community.
Ben?
Really quick question. I don't remember. I think somebody mentioned it a couple of years ago, but what's the difference between the contract for services and the project deliverable lines on the chart?
Good question. And actually, you reminded me of another one I wanted to highlight. The difference between the contract for services is for the time and staff work that the Art Center actually undertakes itself, versus the project deliverable is some additional financial support for the actual art sculpture or the work that's done at the roundabout. One of the benefits of having this relationship is the Art Center is a 501c3 and can avail of grants, and sometimes having that money available can be really useful as match. The other item that you reminded me to mention is our sister city program. I want to assure you that has received funding. It's not a zero, but because of the long-term nature and relationship that we have with our sister city association, we've actually created its own line item for that. And so that'll be highlighted in the city council budget when we get there. I just wanted to make that note.
So how do we distinguish between one-time funding and reoccurring? Is there some designation?
I wouldn't say there's a designation for that. It is something to keep in mind. One-time funding that it may be presented as one-time funding, and then it kind of spills over into recurring. And so there's not a clear distinction there. Sometimes a program needs some support on the front end to get up and running. Sometimes the program is hoping for that, and then they need it ongoing. And so I just wanted that additional note at the bottom. Has captured that evolution as a project or an event has gone on. I think one example is the 4th of July fireworks. That's something that I originally, and when I was here, was talked about as some initial funding, but has required ongoing funding, which is certainly fine. That's a tremendous show for this community. And so that kind of captures the evolution of some of these events. Last year, we actually budgeted $50,000 for the fireworks show. but that was to capture kind of the biennial nature of the show. They have to sign a contract right about now for a show right after July 1st. And so we have prepaid, if you will, for this coming July 4th show in the current year's budget. So the 25,000 listed here is for next year's show. And so that was that kind of explains that bump on that particular line item.
Tell me what safe space is.
So Safe Space was a funding request that we received after the end of January or end of January deadline. This is a youth empowerment shelter, and honest, thank you. It's not a youth empower. I was
Those are two
honestly,
separate things.
thank you. I was looking up to ask if you would like to speak to it
Yes.
first.
So Safe Space, I think she came and did a presentation, but basically it is where children from Wasco, Sherman, and Hood River County go to meet with everyone they need to after there's an allegation of abuse, either physical or sexual. So it's a one-stop place that's set up to show the least amount of trauma to a child going through this experience, where they can gather all of the evidence that they need to go to court.
So they're housed in Hood River, but we have a satellite here.
No, it's one space. It's quite the facility. And most of the current clientele, I guess is what you would say, unfortunately comes from the Dalles and Wasco County, but it had just been located in Hood River County because that's where they had space and volunteer doctors.
Right.
And so they have a new facility and they've gotten donations, but the facility itself is quite expensive. And then they've expanded to the number of providers because they had been unfortunately having so many children coming in that needed service.
So I see that there's not any money is allocated.
Yeah, unfortunately, when I mentioned her and asked her if she had applied, it was past the January deadline, and so she missed it. But it is in there.
Got it.
just
Thank
in
you.
case we want to.
Any other questions? Serene,
So the idea is that while someone might have missed that deadline, it's still possible for us to choose to fund something.
that's the purview of the budget committee. That's part of the reason why we're here this evening and why I provided all that information to you. I'd be remiss though, and it's no judgment on any funding request that was submitted after that date, but that process that we're going through was intentional. And so, making decisions that fund requests that were received after that undermines that process.
And the money will have to come from somewhere else if we decided to, because we have a balanced budget presented to us.
Correct.
Got it.
With that, I will hand it over to Angie. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Correct. So moving past on to page 29, this is where there's some additional information around the fund contingency, unappropriated ending fund balance, and non-recurring revenues. What was that? Followed by on page 30, a breakdown of some of those major expenditures that we walk through. You'll notice some of the additional detail on the city council expenditures, as well as economic development, planning department, police, and onward through the next few pages here. Won't review that in terrible detail. Be happy to answer any questions you have on it.
Mr. Chair, I have a question, if you don't mind.
Chair recognizes
Thank you.
Councilor Richardson.
Mr. Cleaves, tell us about the technology department and the bump there in $180,000 proposed from last year to this year's budget. I'm looking on page 27, just the line items.
So some of the major changes to the technology department reflect some staffing changes. We had an IT manager and an IT help desk staff position a couple of years ago. Last year through the budget process, we created an IT department with a department head who oversaw the help desk staffer. And we also added an additional staff position to support the IT director with systems administration. And so this reflects the growing need and ongoing need and reliance that the city has on IT technology. And so there's a fair amount of significant catch up and upgrades needed to the IT infrastructure that we have here. We want to make sure primarily that we have the staff to support those changes, mitigate risks from cybersecurity threats that a lot of communities, a lot of cities, and a lot of counties are facing. If I can't access my email or access my calendar, my day's pretty much shot. So we wanted to make sure that we had those resources available. So that's the bulk of those changes.
Thank you. And one other, just the overview question here. Last year's budget total, again, page 27, bottom of the page, was just about 19 million. Now it's about 16 and a half. Tell us about the sort of the shuffling or restructuring that led to that decline.
Well, and I think I'll probably tag team with Angie here a little bit, but I think one of the things to keep in mind is that there is a general fund, and then we have various other funds throughout the city. And one of the largest changes for the general fund last year was a transfer into our capital improvement fund. And so that was about $2.5 million or so. And that reflects, again, similar in some ways to the IT department, some deferred maintenance and catch up that needed to be done, as well as future planning for, again, the example I've used a number of times is I think we have 4 different elevators at different facilities. They're all 20, 25 years old. You think about $250,000 per elevator, that adds up pretty quick. And so prior to that transfer, the capital improvement fund didn't have assets to address some of those needs. And as you'll see in the proposed budget here, we're continuing transfers into the capital improvement fund, not to the same scope and size, but I think it's about $385,000 we're proposing to transfer in there. And that is, again, reflective of the needs that we have, again, not only with elevators as my example, but rooftops. And they're all very high dollar figures. So we want to make sure we have those resources available again. And that was a significant transfer out this last year. Do you have anything to add?
Other questions?
Just really quick, 2 other just notes. It looks like the proposed budget for city council went up not quite 100,000, maybe 9. I'm not, public math is terrible. So, and legal and judicial went down by about 70 or so. I know we'll get into the details as we get into the departments, but is there a general reason for the fluctuation?
I think the best, just to be frank with you, I think the best pace would be during those presentations themselves, and we can move to that section of the budget book versus flipping back and forth, if I may.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, so moving forward again. To page 34, our all funds summary, and now I will hand it over to Angie.
So the all fund summary takes all of the funds, puts them together, and we'll be getting ready to go into that next and discuss each department and each fund in detail. But this year, with all the funds together, we're budgeting to have a balanced budget of $91,177,447. And the previous pages to follow kind of gives a breakdown of summaries of each department to be able to allow you to see the current versus the previous fiscal year of the difference in the change. And then on page 40 is our transfers. Every year we do a transfer of methodology. And the general fund department provides services to the city, city's airport, the library, and the public works funds. City council, city manager, city clerk, city attorney, finance, technology, and personnel will be compensated, and the transfer will be provided to the general fund for those services. To compensate the cost of the services, a percentage of the expenses of each department is charged to the three, the Public Works, Library, and Airport. The calculation of the services are based on the level of services that are provided. 4 indicators of services are used, like we propose operating budgets for the coming fiscal year, for the prior fiscal year, information on the number of employees, number of invoices processed, and a number of agenda items, and for each Public Works, Library, and Airport funds. If you turn to page 42 of the budget book, you'll notice, for example, for the water and the wastewater fund, the utility department is charged in those 2 funds only. So the street fund, library fund, and the airport fund are not charged for those services.
One aspect I'd like to add is under this transfer methodology, we have the airport, which is in partnership with Klickitat County. Klickitat County also provides certain services to the airport. And so there is basically a reconciliation process that we go through where we look at the services that the city provides to the airport, and we have a value, and then we engage with Klickitat County partners in the services they provide, and then we reconcile that. Again, the approach there as 50-50 owners is that we share 50% of the costs and services. So just wanted to add that note as part of the process we have.
Does anyone have any questions regarding the transfer of methodology before we move forward?
Anyone? All right, let's move forward.
All right, so I would like you to turn, you can basically turn to page 49. These are the pages here, and you might have to turn your budget book that detail the capital improvement plans that we have for our various departments. This area was updated quite significantly in terms of formatting and structure, as well as content. And so this details 5-year capital improvement plans broken out by each department. One of the major changes here is prior capital improvement plans included smaller items that were under $5,000 or more maintenance in nature. And so all of those, in essence, have been removed and included either in the general services department or individual department funds. And so that way, what we're really looking at here are those capital items over the next few years. And so that, if you've been on the budget committee and council for some time, that was a pretty substantial change over the course of this year through the work of our finance department, along with our auditors. The other item I wanted to mention is, again, we're not just looking at the capital improvement needs for the city facilities that we have, from library and police and city hall, state office building, and public works, but also some of that other infrastructure that we have, some of those public amenities that we've already made some progress on down at the dock again, Lewis and Clark Park, and the downtown street trees. But the roundabout, streetscaping, some of the parking lots that we have, and making sure that we have adequate resources to properly maintain those as well. So in this section, it's quite robust. Be happy to answer any questions. Again, the different departments will present in these different areas and can answer some of your questions. But if there aren't any jumping off the page, I would direct you to page 59. These are the summary of the interfund transfers that we have. And I see on my notes that I'm taking Angie's spot here, so I'm going to hand it back over.
Sorry, I do have one question, if I may. How are we, this is new, right? The capital improvement plan being included in the budget?
Revised.
Revised. How should we be using this, as we are not going to be commenting on budgets for, say, 27, 28, right? Is this just useful context for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ways that I find it useful is in supporting, again, the capital improvement transfer that we had last year and ongoing, as well as those capital expenditures in the various departments. And so, looking at Looking out 2, 3, 4, 5 years, beyond that, the numbers really start to get wonky on what the cost estimates may be. But understanding what's coming down the pipeline and knowing some of those cost liabilities are out there is important to make in budgeting the different resources that we have. We may not be able to do, two rooftops and 2 elevators in the same year. So how are we breaking those out and meeting those goals and making sure that we're transferring enough over? So when we get to 2028, there's the resources available to put a new roof on City Hall, for example, or to replace an end of life piece of equipment. And so this information is very helpful for citywide projects, and even more so when it comes to the Public Works Department. And we're talking about major pieces of infrastructure. One example being the Dog River Pipeline, for example.
Thank you.
On page 59, you'll find that our interfund transfers. This is the sheet that we keep track of to make sure that we have transfers coming in and transfers going out as a balanced sheet. This is something that is required through state budget law. If we do not have the transfers in and out balance, it is an audit finding. And so we typically we will move money over. For example, if you look under the general fund for the street fund, there's $750,000 that we've budgeted to go into the street fund. And then if you just keep going down the line, you'll see all of the transfers that we're budgeting to transfer in or out. And then if you turn to page 61, that is where we get into the general fund revenues. Is there something you wanted to add?
Yep, just a final note here. I think in particular, page 59 is useful because you will see a transfer out of one fund, and then you'll see it as a transfer in another fund. And so sometimes it can be hard to transfer where money from a particular fund is going into a different fund. And so this page in particular is a summary page for all of those transfers, is really helpful as a reference tool. So just again, some of the utility of that information.
So we're going to start getting into the actual general fund budget now, and we'll start with the general fund revenues. I actually like to go off the worksheets, which is starts on page 62. That's where you'll see the blue highlighted writing, and then it gives a little bit more detail. So I'll be working off the worksheets, and most department heads will be also. Again, just a quick reminder that on the left side of the page is your 21-22 actuals, your 22-23 actuals, and then what we've budgeted for this year, for our current year that we're in, for 23-24. And this year, as I mentioned earlier, our beginning fund balance is lower. It's at 2.866459. That's due to the last year the transfers out into the capital project fund. We also have budgeted for our property taxes for our current and our prior, and those have increased as they should, due to taxes increasing. We also have our Sprint, our light speed network, that has lowered a little bit. This is, an estimate of what we think we'll receive prior to what we're currently receiving. The Dalles disposal, we're expecting a slight increase due to them having a 2.65 rate increase. The transient room tax, we are anticipating a small increase in transient room tax. The local liquor licenses, those we're expecting to be about the same. Building permits, due to the current year of what we're receiving in the prior year, we've reduced those back down to 5,000. Sign permits and other licenses are pretty much staying close to the same. Every year we budget to receive Wasco County Planning Share. This is where we share half of a senior planner. We have remaining 1,254 acres. We're initially in the UGA, we have a remaining of 361 available. So that is the amount that we're budgeted to hopefully receive from them. financial services. This is where the finance department helps out the Mid-Columbia Fire District. And this is the budgeted number of what we think we will receive for doing their financial services. The state revenue sharing is what we mentioned earlier. And this is based off of our population. And it is a budgeted number that it's an estimate. And we're planning on receiving 244,000. We also have DUI grants. Those grants, there is a mix of a couple of grants. They have the traffic, they have DUI grants, and some smaller grants that actually go into that line item. Marijuana tax revenue. It is dropping continuously due to the decline that we've had with Measure 110. So that continues to decrease. And this year we're budgeting to receive 187,000. State cigarette tax, it's showing that is going to go down a slight bit, along with the state liquor tax will go up, increase a little bit. The urban renewal, we're planning on receiving $140,000, and this is for us offering services to them. And they keep a timesheet and they track their hours, and then we bill out on a monthly basis. The PUD intergovernmental fees, this has been increasing over the years. If you look over 21-22, we received 1.784. 22-23, we received 2.327, and we are budgeting to receive 2.8 this next year. And the next proposed budget for this next year, 3.496. So that's increased quite a bit. And then we have the other small items that do come out. Interest revenue is, just really kind of an estimated guess on what our interest rates are going to be and how much we'll receive in those. And the lease revenue is on Q Life, Dock, and the ground lease for our advertising signs. We also receive a small amount for Q Life administrative services that our city manager provides, and our other miscellaneous revenue that come in for TRT, SAFE, Cigna, and refunds. And on page 63, we're budgeting to receive our 280,000 annual agreement that we receive for our enterprise zone funds. And then below that, you will see our transfers. As I mentioned earlier before, these are where the transfers are coming into the general fund. And we'll get into the city council budget, and we'll be going through that detail, and Matthew will.
So just one additional comment back on page 62. Angie mentioned a moment ago lease revenues. If you'll notice on the left side of your page, that it took a decent increase from $10,000 up to about 75. Much of that is reflected in the lease of the cruise ship dock that we have here to American Cruise Lines. So that's a decision that was made not this year, but in the year prior, which is the main reason for that increase. Just wanted to highlight that for the committee. Turning to page 64, we'll begin diving into the different funds themselves, starting with city council. And so again, as Angie mentioned, we have cover pages, if you will, for each department that gives you a brief summary of what that department focuses on, what its mission is, as well as some of the accomplishments from this last fiscal year and what they might be working on in the upcoming year. And so turning to page 67, again, these are the budget worksheets where it contains much of the detail that go into the individual line items. And so first and foremost, looking at contractual services, what's in this portion, as I mentioned prior, are the recommending funding allocations for those requests that we received before January 31st. You'll see there on the second blue line, the Sister City program has been zeroed out. But if you look down below, you'll see cultural partnerships. And so that is where we've allocated all of the different expenditures that we have for the Sister Cities program, not only the support of the Dalles Sister City Association, but travel for council and staff representatives, as well as dignitary gifts. So that's a pretty big change from contractual services into its own line item. You'll see the Lions Club pickleball court is listed there. That was not recommended for funding at this time. It was for the amount of about $20,000. They have a very significant project that they're undertaking. And one of the things I try and focus on is, we allocate these funds for projects that will use them in the upcoming year. I know that they are working with other agencies to garner more support. And so if they are able to make some progress, I encourage them to apply again at the next year's cycle. I also wanted to note here, before we jump even further down, but up above, you'll see stipends. So this has been a discussion at the city council level where the mayor and city councilors receive a very small stipend. Previously, it was $100 for city councilors and $200 for the mayor. We had some council discussion a little while ago and increased those to $400 and $500 respectively. One of the major impetuses from that was actually from our local government academy, where we had some conversation around some of the barriers that prevent people from being able to dedicate a substantial amount of time and volunteer. As the councilors know around the dais, especially this year, we've had quite a number of work sessions already, in addition to city council meetings at least twice a month. Oftentimes they go quite late. And, we want to make sure that we are providing resources to remove some of those barriers, which could be childcare, could be work related. And so reflecting that support, we've included those resources in the budget for this year. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I may turn it to Amy if she's ready, down below, this is also where under workshops, you'll see line item 58-60. This last year, we had a facilitator, Sarah Singer Wilson, work with us for our city council goal setting session. This is something that I would like to continue and bring that facilitator back. Over the last few years, we've really been spending a lot of time to improve the city council goal setting process that we've been having. Most notably, right out of the gate was timing. We typically now have the city council goal setting session in November that allows staff time and community input through the budget process that follows leading to tonight's session. And so Sarah Singer Wilson has worked with a variety of communities, oftentimes, or in many instances, on an ongoing basis, and it just helps improve that process from year to year. The other thing I'm very excited that we will be continuing is the Local Government Academy. This is something that took a pause during COVID. We brought it back next year, and I'll turn it over to Amy at this point to highlight that program itself.
Well, you actually have a graduate from the Local Government Academy on your budget committee this evening. Jan was a part of the bring back of the Local Government Academy. And we do tours, presentations, conversations. The goal was to make local government more accessible, more understandable, and to get people to want to become a part of it. So it worked for a couple of we had 12 graduates, and we had 2 that joined. One joined the Beautification and Tree Committee, and then Jan tonight is on our budget committee, and we hope to continue to do that more in the future. There is in the budget enough funding to do this for 1 session. If things go well in the future, perhaps we could do 2.
Perfect. That's great. It's a tremendous pipeline to improve transparency with our own local community, to get people involved in their local government. Even tonight, some of the formalities and steps that we have can be quite intimidating. So, introducing people to what we do and what we don't do in a lot of ways is incredibly helpful. Do you have a?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. We do offer, if people need it, translation services to Spanish, correct?
Translation and interpretation. And then in the budget, we were also asking for some funding for childcare needed as well.
And so the last couple items I wanted to highlight, the bulk of the city council budget here, or a substantial portion of it at least, is through contractual services. You'll see in the page that we handed out to you, there's a gray line item This is Open Campus in Hudtos with OSU. This is actually a project that requested an extension due to some challenges with coordinating with the local community college. And so that is not additional funds going out. We're rolling those funds from last year. And I do know, I wanted to highlight some of the funding requests that we received. You know, for McKed, the Link Public Transit Service. This has been a program that we've been supporting for a couple of years to help McKed provide that service to our constituents that we have. It's also in line with one of the recommendations from our Climate Resiliency Committee and supporting public transit. As I mentioned a moment ago, the City Sisters program moved down into cultural partnerships. Youth Think, this is an ongoing funding support for their efforts on reaching out and working with our youth. Fort Dalles Displays, $25,000 for a fireworks show. Columbia Gorge Humane Spay and Neuter. This is a new funding request that we received, again, in partnership with Columbia Gorge Humane Society. And in particular, I wanted to call this one out because it's brand new. It's not one that we've done before, and it's a decent allocation of funds. You know, we've had a growing challenge with animals in the community who are not spayed and neutered. And so to partner with Columbia Gorge Humane Society to help bring those services in particular to lower income individuals in partnership with some of the vets, most likely, may be a great addition to support those services in our community. And I know that Sunny Simon is on the call right now. Sunny, would you like to give us any update on the development of that program? And you're muted.
Thank you for this opportunity. Yeah, I have reached out to all of the veterinarians in the Dalles, and we are going to partner on this together, and they're going to provide services for vaccinations, and they're going to cancel out the office visits, which will enable us at the same time to license their dog. That'll be the only charge that they will have. But through this process, but we will be able to kill two birds with one stone. In other words, we'll get their animals in to be spayed and neutered. We'll get them vaccinated and we'll get them licensed. And so far, all of the vets are cooperating in the Dalles, and I'm now in the process of reaching out to Hood River.
Thank you, Sunny. And that was one of the hopes for the program, is that we would have partner vet offices, you know, possibly donating their time if the program helps support the materials and supplies needed to do the spay or neuter. Also included here is continuing support for the Dalles Main Street program at $25,000, the Beautification and Tree Committee and their annual projects. We spoke about the Art Center contract and their projects a moment ago. There is an additional request associated with wall dogs in Main Street for an additional mural at $5,000. The Beautification Committee also has a program, grant program for trees in the community. Their pilot project was last year, and that was quite successful. So we'd like to see that ongoing. And then $25,000 for the YES program. And so those are some of the notable highlights in the City Council budget, some of the changes. There's always, well, typically there's some robust discussion around some of these funding requests. Again, I'll make note that we have a parking lot behind us here. If there are any comments or questions or things that the committee want us to put down on that parking lot and discuss later if appropriate. And with that, that is the City Council.
Yes, program, that's youth empowerment. Is that a youth empowerment? Yes. The acronym, is that what it stands for?
Empowerment Shelter, correct.
Okay, thank you.
And if there are no questions to the City Council budget,
I have one.
Yep.
Let me flip a second.
Yep, sorry, go ahead.
Tell me about the request. I think it came in too late, and of course I lost track of it. The safe space request. Is that a one-time? Sorry, I lost the page.
It's page 28.
That's it. This was a council project that you are not recommending that we fund.
And again, I'll just be clear that it's a not not a funding recommendation based on the validity of the project in any way, but simply the deadline associated with our funding request process.
Yeah.
As Councilor Long mentioned a moment ago, there's a new facility. Executive Director Beatrice Lynch actually presented to the council, I think about a year or so ago, in support of a new office space in Hood River. That project has moved forward, and they were seeking additional funding support for a satellite office here in the Dalles.
Is that would that be one-time support or project support or programmatic support or ongoing support?
My recollection from our conversation is that it would be one-time funding support.
How late were they? Oh, was it close or was it not close to the deadline?
It was in February. I can go back and double check.
I think it was something that slipped through the cracks because she had came and presented to us and asked for money, and we said, come back in our funding cycle.
Oh.
And then we didn't, I don't know. Shouldn't say we didn't reach out to her. She didn't see emails from us. Matthew thinks that emails did go out to her and everyone else. So.
Right. We did do outreach to prior recipients of funds to inform them of the new process and the need to submit a request, as well as those who express interest. And I believe that we had some posts on Facebook and other outreach to let the community at large know about the process as well.
I believe the process was fair and robust, and I have no critique of that. And I also take your point that we need to have a process and we need to stick to it, not undermine it. And there are many worthy projects and ideas to support in our community. Just personally, philosophically, I feel that kids in abusive or dangerous circumstances sort of need a little extra support and advocacy because they can do very little of that for themselves. So I'm interested in flexing that specifically for this request, or at least talking about that.
And that may be a perfect item to add to our parking lot.
Please add that to the parking lot.
Be nice to know exactly what the request was.
Okay.
Do we have to find a difference of the money by getting rid of something else to?
We will eventually come to that, but I think one of the purposes of the parking lot is to pull all these different pieces together. And so we don't make a bunch of changes for one particular item and then in the next budget find another one. Through the process, we may find things that we want more support for or want to make a change here and there. So putting them on the parking lot for the discussion after the presentations is very helpful. In particular, what we'll do is we'll focus on the general fund first, try and close that and make any changes there before moving into some of the other funds. Okay.
Move on.
And so I'd like to direct you to the next department that we have here, page 71, our city clerk's budget, and I will hand this over to Amy.
What was that number again?
Page 71.
All right, thank you.
And hello again, I'm Amy, the city clerk, and also public information officer was added to the title when I took it over in October of last year. There's very little major changes in my budget, so this one will go pretty quickly, hopefully. Probably the biggest that you may notice is in the personnel services. And that would be because I am new and I am much lower on the wage scale than your last city clerk. And so that, along with benefits, significantly reduced that amount. Also, in the training and conferences, you'll notice there's a slight increase. One of the requirements of my position was to be certified clerk within 3 years. And that means I'm going to be going to some professional development in Tacoma, week-long. It's a little bit more for travel and expenses. And then this coming fiscal year, I am in the cycle to receive a new laptop. And so that's that increase. It's on a 5-year rotation and my laptop is up to be replaced. Any questions?
All right, so moving on to the next department that we have here on page 75. This will be the city manager's department. Again, this is a pretty straightforward department as well. There are two staffers in this department, both myself and the executive assistant here. Detailed in some of the line items, such as 5810 for travel, food, and lodging, ongoing education, and attending different conferences in the region. I wanted to call out specifically, there is an Oregon City County Managers Association conference, which is an excellent one. Oftentimes they're a little few hours away, but this year it'll be right in Hood River. And so we'll be doing a tour of downtown the Dalles with our community development department and urban renewal agency. And the last day of the session is kind of a city manager, I guess you could say, or city government kind of 101, and also some facilitated sessions around city managers and how they interact and engage and support their various departments, and what those department managers wish their city manager might know. So it'll be a really interesting conversation. You can sign up for the last day of that conference if there's any interest from around the room. It's just $100. So you don't have to sign up for the whole thing. And so I wanted to share that far and wide. Also noted here in line item 58-70, you'll see membership dues and subscriptions. Again, maintaining those memberships with the International City Managers Association. But we've also added membership into the Oregon Latinos and Local Government and the Local Government Hispanic Network. We are still making strides or effort in those areas to have meaningful engagement and to have meaningful support in that area, and not just paying dues for dues sake, making sure that some of those resources are shared. And so I hope to see some growing strength in that area over the course of this next year. Again, this one's pretty straightforward, to put it bluntly. And so I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Just curious, what is VEBA? All of the payrolls have VEBA contributions, and I don't know what that is.
Voluntary employee benefit.
Nick, you want to come up here? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I forgot. VEBA's a voluntary employment program that we use where if an employee has over 600 hours of sick time, we contribute a certain amount of hours into that. It's tax-free. It's kind of like a flex spending account. That's what VEBA is. So every department has the opportunity to have that.
And yeah, I saw it in all those departments, and I didn't know what that was. This may not be the right time to say this, but it would be really helpful to have maybe an index with all of these abbreviations. There's so many short little things like VEBA and IGA and ICS and LUDO, which I found. Anyway, but just trying to figure all that stuff out is really difficult for we county people, city people, sorry. I have no idea what a lot of these things are. Some of them are easy to find, but it's a lot of work to try and find all of those things. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a great idea, and I will make note of that. Thank you.
Heck, I've been around 13 years and I still get confused. Acronyms.
Yeah, it's sometimes easy for us to rattle them off when you're in that sector. And again, touches upon the local government academy and trying to demystify some of those portions. So if you have questions about an acronym, please ask.
Right.
Right. And I'd like
Shall we
to
move on?
turn your attention to our legal department, and I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Matthew. Good evening, committee. Page 79 is the legal department's proposed budget worksheet. There are so many acronyms. You got LUDO, Land Use and Development Ordinance, OCAA's Oregon City Attorneys Association, OSB is the Oregon State Bar, CLE is a continuing legal education. I think that's all of them. Maybe not so many. Find any others, we're happy to help clarify. The legal department's budget this proposed fiscal year has been reduced by a bit over 10%. some of the city councilors, I'm sure will know, and maybe some budget committee members as well, that last fiscal year was the first fiscal year where the city attorney's office was sort of reintroduced, the full swing of things. In the year 2020, legal services was outsourced by contract to a local law firm. And I think last year was the first year that it was back in-house. And so as part of that budget process last year, it was certainly our best guess. This year, we've tried to hone in on actual expenditures more. And you might notice one of the largest reductions this year is for the proposed budget is about $100,000 less than it was last year in contractual services. And I can attribute that savings primarily to my recommendation to you all to increase or to propose for the city council to increase my part-time paralegal to a full-time role. And I think with a very modest increase there from a 0.5 FTE to a 1.0 FTE, the city can realize significant savings in the form of contractual services. Aside from that, increase from a 1.5 to a 2.0 full-time employee department. The rest of the budget's more or less the same. Legal's always a black box sometimes when it comes to looking into the future. Sometimes the crystal ball isn't so clear. And so we like to have some funds on hand. You never know what might pop up. I offer services to every department and council and commission of the city. And so we try to take a very conservative look when it comes to spending, but it's nice to have the budgetary resources when you need them, especially when legal matters are so uncertain. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any connected with my budget.
Questions?
That was a
Thank
good
you.
investment. Thanks for that advice on the legal assistance.
Thank you.
And if there are no questions on this department, I will turn it to my left now. Page 84.
So the first department we'll get into is the finance department. The finance department has 4 full-time FTEs, and this has been consistent with the previous years. And the contractual services this year is basically the same as the previous years. This year, we do have the budget book for 35,000 that's in the plan. We did not get to implement that last year due to having new auditors and just everything that came up through the year. So that is something that we would like to propose again this year and hopefully get accomplished. The budget book. The budget book would be an electronic budget book. So it would be the process of it being online would be much better. It would be more streamlined. It would just give you a lot more information on historical and in future. So it would just have a lot more that would be documented. The accounting and advisory services, this is consistent with the previous years. We have to do an OPEB analysis if we go over 100 employees, and the OPEB analysis is other post-employment benefits. So we'll be budgeting for that again. We also budget for possible accounting assistance if needed. We have a lot of new rules that come in place annually, and sometimes we do need assistance with those. And the other thing on the finance is on our assets, less than 5,000. That hasn't decreased this year just due to the fact that we're not on the schedule to receive except for one computer that's on schedule. Any questions regarding the finance? Okay, the next one would be the utility billing. I have 1.5 FTE for my utility department. And they do the utility billing for the water and the services. And we have a Bend mailing outsourcing services on our contractual services. This is something that we've done annually. It's very helpful and it helps keeps the FTEs down for the workload. And this year on our assets less than 5,000, there is an increase because there is more front desk and computers that are on the replacement. And then on the judicial it's 0.75. 0.5 of that is our judicial clerk, and the other 0.25 is our judge. And the contractual services has decreased quite a bit this year just due to we do not have the contract with Wasco County. That's something that we eliminated in January, and it will take effect July 1st. And then our court appointed fees, I did increase that a small amount just for if we receive somebody that needs help with legal services, and that is something that we do need to provide. And does anyone have any questions regarding those? Okay. I think the next would be our human resources.
Good evening, Budget Committee. So we're starting on page 90, and just a 30,000-foot level summary is Human Resources Department has 2 full-time personnel, myself and a full-time safety officer. Safety officer obviously manages city safety programs, identifies new approaches, processes, PPE, that sort of thing. HR department, if we have funding for it for those types of needs, then we purchase them for other departments. This was changed slightly beginning in 2016 when our experience rating was 1.67 for workers' compensation, which was resulted in a significant workers' comp premium. And actually just last year, I reevaluated that experience rating based on our current payroll, and last year's premium was $63,000, roughly $63,000. Applying 2016's experience rating to our current payroll, we would have paid over $500,000 in workers' comp premiums, that experience rating. So the safety officer is more than making up for the expense of their wage and benefits. Getting a little deeper into the budget, my department also manages the risk management program for the city, and that's going to include property, general liability, auto, as well as workers' compensation. Part of the struggle, and it was demonstrated in the graphs at the beginning of the budget, was premiums for property insurance. They have been going up by double digits for over a decade. And that's not just something that's unique to the city of the Dalles. It's commercial property insurance rates in general. And part of that is in particular for local governments in Oregon, because state law requires us to reinsure property. That adds an additional cost, and the reinsurers base our reinsurance rate on the national risk. We are in effect paying for wildfires in California, tornado damage in the Midwest, hurricane damage in the Southeast, in addition to the wildfire damage that we may have experienced in Oregon. So part of that is kind of out of our hands largely. We just hired a new agent of record for our insurance on that side of the house this year, and they are Hood River Insurance, or Columbia River Insurance, excuse me, in Hood River. And I will be working with them to see if we can come up with some strategies to help reduce the impact of property insurance, because at this rate, we're going to reach a point where we can no longer afford to insure city property, just because of the fact that the premiums are increasing at such a exorbitant rate compared to what revenues are increasing, not only in general fund, but the enterprise funds the city has. So looking at different alternatives on what we might be able to do there and whether or not it makes reasonable sense. Premiums for that, not in human resources, they are actually in general services, but wanted to cover that just because my department's the one that's managing that and some of the difficulties involved there. Some of the significant changes in the human resources budget go along with that. Part of it is recruiting costs are up a bit from last year. Part of that is some anticipated high-level retirements in the coming year, in addition to taking a different approach to recruiting. You ask any organization that employs people, last 5 years have been a utter nightmare when it comes to recruiting and filling vacancies, particularly for police officer positions or law enforcement positions. Very difficult. And part of that is gearing up, getting the equipment we need for going to job fairs and advertising the city of the Dalles community and the police department organization, public works department, and that'll include some banners that aren't necessarily really expensive, but an additional cost that goes along with that. So that's included in the recruiting costs. Then under safety supplies, there's a couple of significant additions. One is stay bag supplies, and those are for emergency essential personnel. So that's going to include police officers and emergency essential personnel in public works in the event of a catastrophe that closes down access to surrounding communities. Those employees, one, are going to have to respond to emergencies locally, and they're going to need to be able to get there. And if they're outside of the community when that event happens, probably going to be blocked off from you getting to work. So anyone that's actually at the city is going to be responsible for staying and making sure that the essential services of the city that are not up and running get up and running as quickly as possible. And so stay bags are part of that process, and it includes everything from sleeping cots, sleeping bags, potable water, MREs. The only thing in there that's going to be perishable is going to be the MREs, and we're getting those from the Oregon Employment Department, or Oregon Emergency Management, excuse me. And then an environmentally controlled room, they're going to be good for 4 to 5 years. The plan is to turn them back over to state after 3 years. The state then takes them and distributes them to homeless. We get a new batch that's then good for another 3 to 4 to 5 years. And that switchover doesn't cost us any additional funding. It's just an exchange at that point. So the initial investment here is crucial. And that's all to make sure that we have the appropriate assets on site in order to maintain city services in the event of a catastrophe. The other piece is part of a process that began actually a couple of years ago, and that is evacuation signs. We don't currently have any signage for an evacuation of either part of or all of the city. And rather than getting stationary signs that could inevitably direct people to go the wrong direction, the plan is to get mobile signs that we can modify to direct people appropriate direction they need to go based on the hazard that's presented. for the evacuation and worked out with the streets manager what those signs would be, how many we need, and how much they would be per sign. And so we budgeted in this budget to purchase those signs for that. I will take any questions.
At one time, it seemed like there was a civic, that there was a federal agency that did those things that were related to emergency evacuation, fallout. Whatever happened to that? Now the city picks that up?
So generally, the county is going to be the point on emergency response. City, of course, would work hand in hand with the county in doing that. And we did actually in the formation of our evacuation plan, and we're currently working with them with the updated emergency operations plan. Part of the difficulty is for the federal government to respond, that's going to take weeks. And in the event of a catastrophe or a natural disaster, folks in the Dalles are not going to have weeks. They're going to,
correct,
particularly in an evacuation, it's going to be minutes, some cases, to evacuate.
Thank you. Other questions? All right, let's keep moving.
We'll say any part in this budget that has HR, that's human resources, not Hood River.
Oh, thank you for that
Last year.
clarification. All right.
Sure. It says HR director access to HR law firm.
Yes, human resource.
Human resources law firm. Who's that?
Labor law.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Our next department is the community development.
Good evening, Joshua Chandler, Community Development Director. The Community Development Department is that I'll be discussing two back-to-back budgets for you. The first on page 95, Community Development. This is mostly what's included in here is mostly planning and historic preservation. So I'll get into those and then I'll jump to economic development after that. So this department supports the work of City Council, Planning Commission, Historic Landmarks Commission, and the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency. The Community Development Director is the manager of the Urban Renewal Agency. The agency recommended approval of this next year's fiscal year budget at the April 16th meeting, and we'll be adopting the budget at the May 21st meeting. I'll be discussing here, like I mentioned, planning and historic preservation. This first, if you can go to page 95, that is where this starts. Planning and historic preservation is broken up really into three categories. There's long range planning, current planning, and historic preservation. Really, aside from salaries, this year's budget is rather status quo from years past, with a total material and services increase of about $7,000. This coming year, the Community Development Department will be finalizing the 2024 housing production strategy. This is not coming out of our budget because we received a grant from DLCD to do this work. We'll also be taking on some short-term rental amendments here in the coming months, some flood map adoptions and associated amendments, and also working on putting together an RFP for a new GIS system. I know I was back here a year ago talking about this and looking into it more. It was just we needed a little bit more than what was budgeted this last year. So we're going to be using the available ARPA funds to assist in that. I think we'll be talking about those ARPA funds at a later time. We are currently budgeted for 5 FTE. We're currently operating at 4 FTE. We've been short-staffed a little bit. As Mr. Hunter just mentioned, it's been pretty difficult trying to recruit for higher level planning positions. So We are short-staffed in the senior planner position, but we have retained the services of a land use consulting firm, MIG. They are assisting us now with some of that planning work. So as you'll see, that is probably the biggest, one of the biggest things to note in your worksheet here is an increase for planning consulting services of $50,000 budgeted for this next year. And that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Who administers sign ordinances? Does that fall under your department?
It does, yeah. Yeah. So
Where
we'll
is
be
that?
in here, it would be something that would be assisted with our land use consultant to help put together. Are you talking about sign code amendments?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a big undertaking. It's one of the bigger projects to take on a full overview of our sign code. It's going to take a little bit more hands on deck for that one. So I'm hoping more I get used to working with this consultant. We have a couple items that they're currently working on. And after that, we can hopefully take on some getting into the world of sign code updates.
Thank you.
All right. I will jump to economic development. This is on page 101. Economic development. We saw the biggest increase of economic development last year, and that was because we added an economic development officer. We were still recruiting this time last year, but we've successfully recruited, and he's been a great asset to the city so far. This division of the community development department receives support from the city manager's office, planning division, urban renewal agency, Wasco County Economic Development Commission, other regional partners. Since hiring our EDO this last year, we've been able to move the needle a little bit more on citywide economic initiatives. In addition, our EDO provides the urban renewal agency direct support and is currently in the process of guiding the agency through a much needed urban renewal update, which is last time that happened was in 2009. This division also is involved with the enterprise zone, strategic investment program, brownfields, opportunity zone, vertical housing, the list goes on. And we're just, like I said, grateful to have filled this position. Overall, the budget for this, for the economic development decreased a bit from the previous year, about $13,000. This was contributed, I think, to moving the funding for Main Street into the city council's budget, as well as completing our rare placement for this last year, as well as a portion of our downtown parking study already being completed so far. So some highlights of this last year, like as I mentioned, the hiring of an EDO, a success with our funding for a rare this last year. Ann Moorhead, who is our rare, has done an incredible job for the city, working on an energy audit of city facilities, a citywide Wi-Fi RFP, tourism asset and outdoor recreation inventory with the Chamber of Commerce, as well as a very cool art installation of ghost signs on the Getchell Waldron Drug Building. This is my plug. If you haven't seen notifications yet, the Illuminate the Dalles event is launching this Friday. So we will be lighting up the Getchell building for the first time. So Friday at 8 to 8:30, about when the sun goes down, is when that will be lighting up for the first time. And as I mentioned, work is currently underway for our downtown parking study, which would be the first parking study we've done in 20 years. So that a bunch. Answer any questions.
So how often will that be lit? Every night?
It will be lit every night. Yep.
Okay, because I won't be here Friday. I'm looking forward to it.
Lit every night and it'll flash. There's this phasing in and out of 3 different signs that it'll flash. Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Cool. Councilor Richardson, your question.
Thank you. 2 questions. One of them serious. Discuss the movement of Main Street, the funding for Main Street from the EDO or community development to us, to the council. Is that to put our city manager in charge of that, given his extensive background, or is there another reason for moving that around?
I can take that one if you'd like. No, it was not intended to place me directly overseeing that, although I am engaged with Main Street in their efforts. Our EDO is much more closer to that organization. The reason for that change is Main Street took a pause, I think the prior year, and we wanted to make sure that we were engaging with them and developing, that scope of work associated with that funding support, and that the ongoing nature of that support that's been with Main Street. And so we wanted to make sure that there was a process that we'd be going through to have that funding request come in to prompt that discussion. In prior years, it has been in this line item,
Right.
and has been a recurring nature. But we want to make sure that we're doing our diligence on these different funding requests that we receive and making sure that we're still in alignment. And so that was more of the rationale for that change.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And can we add one item to your years coming list of projects, and that is to come down solidly behind one name for that old building that we're going to illuminate, because every time I say the one, it's the other. And
Yeah. Well, I just put a slash in between the two.
Yeah, I think that's something we could resolve. I feel like we have the intellectual firepower to solve that problem.
He's referring to Walden and Getchell. Those are the two names.
Yeah. I think the argument would be that Waldron is probably more historic.
It's the beginning. That's where it started. I don't have a question, but I have a comment about the EDO. Adding this position has been invaluable in moving many projects in our city, and it doesn't always surface, but I, for one, appreciate having this position and what the person is doing in our city. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
And if there aren't any other additional questions on these two funds, I may prompt the chair to check with the group if there's need of a bathroom break.
Ooh, we're at, yes, bathroom break. Yeah, we got a nod. Yes, let's take 5 minutes.
Maybe
more than that.
maybe
for
10
three
minutes,
bathrooms.
given the number of. And while we're in recess there, I will pass out additional supplemental information for the safe spaces request.
While in Europe, it was 50 cents for a bathroom pass.
Tired of the.
It's a nice thing.
He knows everything. Are we ready?
Ready?
I just wanted to note during the recess, we handed out a small packet for the safe space request for your information. We put that item on our parking lot, so we'll come back to it. But that is the request that we received February earlier this year. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to our police chief and police captain for the next department.
Very well. Let's begin. Chairman McLaughlin.
Yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you for your time this evening. I'm here to present to you the police department budget for the upcoming fiscal year, which will be also inclusive of codes enforcement and animal control. Seated to my right is Captain Jamie Carrico, who's assisted in every step of this process, and a special thank you as we look backward on this process to both the city manager and the finance director for their expert advice and assistance. Since this is a more complicated budget than some of the others, it's going to take us a few more minutes to get through it. So there is jargon and lingo in this as well. And so if we say something that doesn't make sense, please call us out on it. We do know what they mean, and we'd be happy to help. This budget preparation started back in January with weekly meetings internally, and then expanded to the finance department, ultimately the city manager, and then to what you see before you here today. So the budget is not bloated. The budget is not ambitious. In fact, it adds only a 0.25 FTE as our evidence tech, which formerly 0.75 and is now will be full-time. The work is there to support that, as well as one additional codes enforcement officer. And the genesis to that request came out of city council in the prior budget year. And that is now included in this budget. Those will be the two main drivers for the included expense. And so I'll direct you to page 105 for the police department budget. Like almost everybody's already there. You can read for yourself some of the goals and accomplishments from 24 and what we look forward to going to in 25. One of the main drivers in the police department budget, pardon the pun, is our vehicles. They cost a lot and we have to have them to do our job. So on page 108, we have a special vehicle fleet note, and it notes that adequate police vehicles are critical to the well-being of our police department. It does project professionalism and competence when we have well-maintained and operational and equipped vehicles. The police department has a fleet of 21 vehicles and one utility trailer. While that's a lot, some of those are limited service vehicles, such as a armored vehicle for hostage rescue. There's a radar trailer and a few other things in there too. So they're not all day-to-day black and whites out there you see driving around. If you look on page 109, there is a vehicle fleet plan, which includes all of our vehicles there with their vehicle identification numbers and what they are and what they're used for. I direct your attention to shop 2 and shop 4. Those are our two highest mileage vehicles, and they will be cycled out in this and replaced with new Ford SUV police interceptor vehicles, as is noted in this budget.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please do.
Will they be electric vehicles?
No, we haven't explored that yet. I do see a time in the future where that is a possibility for our department. For right now, our better use case is the gas engines. There might be a case in the future where an electric vehicle would serve the department and the community better and help to green our fleet. That's on our radar. We have thought about it and considered it. It's hard enough to get parts and pieces to fit our existing standard issue police cars right now. And if we went with a Mustang, Tesla, or something that's fully electrified, finding the aftermarket retrofit parts is very difficult. Getting them put together. You're most welcome. In patrol vehicle, just so everyone knows, our patrol vehicles are cycled out between 75 and 85,000 miles. When we replace them, our fleet at this time is in good condition, with the exception of those 2 vehicles that are ready to move out of the department. And our replacement plan calls for two marked vehicles this year and no unmarked vehicles. Typically, you'll see us buy a couple of marked vehicles, meaning blue lights, spotlight, whole thing, and then a detective car. there's a dip right now. We don't have a need for that. And so that's why it's a little bit less this year than last year for that. We did also cycle out Shop 20. Shop 20 is a large SUV that was with codes, and that was moved over to the airport. It no longer had serviceability for the police department. Then additionally, on page 110 in the middle, the department has a 2003 radar trailer that we use to respond to community complaints about traffic safety in the neighborhoods and in the arterials. And that is it's from 2003. It's 3 years old now. It needs to be replaced. The new vehicles that serve the same function come with traffic monitoring software, so it can tell us, how many cars were checked, how fast they were going, and give us better insight into what's actually happening on the streets. But we want to move in that direction. We anticipate that's around $8,000 to purchase a new radar trailer to respond to community complaints. What did I say? Oh, I'm sorry. It was our old one was 8,000. Our new one would be 13,000. Yeah, it's not 20 years ago. Sorry. I looked at my highlight and got that one wrong.
Is that included in this budget proposal?
It is.
Okay.
So still talking police vehicle budget. We're requesting $151,386 dollars and 78 cents for police vehicles this go around. That includes 2 Ford Interceptor all-wheel drive police vehicles. In this last winter, when we had the significant snowfall, our SUVs were essentially the only vehicles making it around town, and they were actually driving out and picking up officers at their homes and bringing them in so they could continue to serve the community. So they definitely showed their value in a climate like the Dalles. It's wise for us to continue with that. It has been in the past good for us to have a mixed fleet with sedans and SUVs. The Dodge Chargers are no longer being manufactured, and so that's an option that's no longer available to us. Once we buy the cars, of course, it's not, they don't come as police cars, they come as cars, and then we have to retrofit them. That's about $20,000 a car to have retrofitting done, which includes vehicle mounts, lights, sirens, prisoner cage, and other police specific equipment, and about $2,000 in graphics in the 2 cars. Anyway, the total amount once you do the upfitting is around $151,368 just for police cars this coming year. Again, I note no unmarked police cars, and so we're happy to move forward with that. Any questions about cars specifically? What did I forget? Let's talk about the balance of the police budget. I'll refer to the police detail sheets on page 114. Page 114 for the proposed police budget. Materials and services. I went through and highlighted things that I thought might be of interest, but I can of course speak to any line item that the committee wants to highlight. We do have contractual services in the amount of $301,000. This is typically things like some software, it's shredding, secure shredding for police confidential documents, as well as other tools that we use around the department. They're all enumerated there. Below that, under contractual services or materials and services, our Wasco County Communications Agreement. This did go up. The police department has 91% share of this, and Public Works has 9%. It's $301,177, and that includes all of our dispatch services, which is provided by Wasco County Sheriff's Department. That is a cost allocation done by calls for service, meaning if you have more calls, you pay more, which does follow because that's work for the dispatchers. So we do wind up paying the lion's share of that dispatch center, and we're happy to be provided with such professional service by Wasco County. We have recruiting expenses, which has been moved to HR. We have been experiencing some additional recruiting expenses, largely in terms of background investigations and other required steps in the recruitment process for police department. And we're happy that that's being managed by HR. Moving forward to page 115. If you note radio equipment, it's about the 3rd subheading down. We do tend to buy a radio or two a year. These radios run about $2,500 each, and they do get damaged or get dropped and broken in various scuffles and police work. We did offset some radio expense through the use of ARPA funds, which I think will be discussed by others, to have our whole system tuned, the back end and the batteries and the programming in the radios had not been done in, not sure how long, it's been a while. So that should improve our radio communications drastically. Everything else is self-explanatory. Travel, food, and lodging I want to address. You'll note that in this budget, it's broken out by the various conferences and training events that we go to, and you'll further note that it's a lot. And that is by design. We have a relatively new police department with at least half of our officers are under 5 years of experience. And we have new supervisors, and they need to go to continuing education training. What we get in the academy is just the beginning, and the training will never stop for a police officer while they're working for the city of the Dalles. They continually strive to get better, learn new skill sets, and serve our community better. And so any of these I can speak to, there's a lot. Further broken out by not just the travel and expense, but the actual tuition. Some classes are free, some classes have significant costs associated with them. For example, OEDI is listed on there, Oregon Executive Development Institute, where we try and move a supervisor, a newer supervisor through that when those classes are available to us to help develop them for succession planning within the department. I noted that reserves still has a line item there. We do not currently have a reserve on the department. Our last reserve got hired by Oregon City. However, we do aspire to reboot that program. And it makes sense for us to do that once all of our FTE are recruited and accounted for, because it has a similar training overhead and requirement. We want to invest that time and energy into our regular officers. We want to maintain that line item, but right now we just have the 8-ball on it. Ammunition, if you look at the bottom of page 117, has gone down in expense. And that is because last year, if you recall, the city council approved a transition for us to new duty sidearms. They had reached end of life, and we went from a 40 caliber round to a 9mm round. It's more readily available and costs less. And so we're realizing that cost savings here. Then at the very bottom of page 117, uniform badge replacements, 31 sets. Our badges are just old, and the seatbelt just lays right across those things and just little by little just wears them down. And so we want to get some new ones to maintain our professionalism and our pride in our appearance. I note on page 118, under special department supplies, computer docks as needed, they're $350 each. We're spending less on those now since we changed model on that. We were breaking pins as the device snaps into the dock. We were breaking pins all the time before. The newer ones on the new devices are functioning much better, so we're not going through those things monthly like we were before. Also in special department supplies, you'll see Narcan, which is an anti-opioid medication. We have $1,000 scheduled there. That's about $80 a dose or so. Sometimes we're using multiple doses on individual patients or people that we're attending to. And that $1,000 is anything in this budget that's going to save lives. That absolutely draw that to your attention. Even a small amount of money can make a huge difference in somebody's life. Also, bolt cutters for all department vehicles. I'm surprised we didn't have them already. Bolt cutters so we can access, storage lots and other places when we're searching for suspects rather than jumping fences. It makes good sense as an investment. And fun fact, that's one of the most stolen items in the balance. We're going to buy them. Then under miscellaneous expenses, there is reimbursement expense for officer buyout. This was on another section of the budget as well as incoming revenue. Under Oregon law, a new police officer under 3 years tenure, if they change departments, the incoming department has to reimburse the outgoing department for their training based on a graduated scale. And so we're if we get the chance to buy, if you will, a lateral officer, we want to have the funds available to do that. And we did that twice last year. I know we got 2 laterals. We bought one of them. We sold one. Want to put it that way.
Chief Worthy, can I pause for just 1 minute? Is the will of the committee to continue? It's now a little bit past 8. We need to make a decision of continuing to complete this tonight. And then we can look at the end of 8:30 and look at that time. Do we have a consensus to continue on?
We just finish this one section because we're like up to capital outlay and then there's kind of a natural break.
You bet.
Great. So we did, we already covered capital outlay for vehicles in some detail. And then I think I'll let the captain speak to expenditures for capital outlay for our mobile video. We have a mixed approach to that.
Yeah. So essentially, we're moving, when we first, we're lucky enough to get body cameras. We purchased the cameras. We're moving now to a lease program. As we update the cameras, warranty reasons, refresh reasons, and it makes sense budgetary wise to know what we're going to be spending. So, of the 12 body cameras we have, we are now starting to use that program into the new police cars with leasing our cameras again to make it more sensible budget wise and know what we're going to be spending each year.
The lease approach adds to our predictability of expense. It also ensures that we're going to continue with new equipment rather than falling in far arrears. And they're so technological right now that they do require firmware upgrades and other upgrades to keep them current. So I think that's a better approach, and we're just going to life cycle out our old ones as we move into that over time. So that's why we're doing that. And thank you for clarifying that. The next section will be codes enforcement. I do note that it's after 8 o'clock now.
Let's take a quick sounding and we can continue if everyone agrees that we'll continue on. All right, let's yes, continue on then.
Okay, diving right into codes enforcement. Codes enforcement is a element of the police department. They have a slightly different mission. The codes enforcement officer works to maintain the city's ordinances, and particularly addressing nuisance properties and Ludo enforcement. Okay. And abatement efforts, meaning that this is really where we go from, handling crime to handling neighborhood nuisances and things that can really downgrade the quality of life within the city. As I mentioned in previous budget year, the city council initiated a request for some research on the additional expense of adding 1 FTE, full-time equivalent within the codes enforcement division, if you will, which has been presented here. That does come with more expense than just the individual. That'll need a workstation, as well as a vehicle and some training and a small amount of software and office supplies. So this budget increases by 56%, I think. But there is the work out there for it. You can see some of the accomplishments in 2024. There were 291 open cases for investigation within codes, and they scrapped 235 junk cars, and that comes at no cost to the city because the scrappers will take those cars for nothing. And also towed 31 abandoned cars and conducted 377 problem property inspections and abated 12 properties. That doesn't sound like that many, but that is a very large number. I think last year Wasco County abated 1 property. And the process behind an abatement, meaning to come in and the city will compel them to clean their yard or whatever the case is, pick the junk out of it, is a lengthy process. It's supported by city legal. There's a lot of notifications and a whole lot of patience involved because the city doesn't act with haste in that. We act with diplomacy and patience. And still to have 12 abatements go through, that's at least 24 neighbors that are really super happy with us. So the work seems to be there for an additional codes enforcement position, as I mentioned. So that FTE from 23-24 to 24-25 will go from 1 to 2. We do have space in the police department to accommodate the new employee. Scan the budget worksheet to see what else there is. Oh, contractual services within codes. When I say abatement, the city does employ contractors to come in and do that work. The city doesn't have staff to do it. So we get low bid from a local contractor to come in and clean up the property. The budget there is $25,000, which is generally sufficient depending on the workload there. In my estimation, it's money. And at the bottom, I mentioned there were additional costs for setting up a new employee. We have $10,000 plugged in there for a desk and miscellaneous, a phone, other stuff like that. So at the end of the day, the codes enforcement total is $324,616. Anybody has a question about the additional officer or the need for it? Nope.
Well, let's ask. Anyone? Questions? All right, continue.
So moving to page 123, 123, we'll discuss animal control. Animal control is another program within the police department. It's sometimes commonly known as the dog catcher, but it is more than catch dogs. Investigates bites, barking, nuisance complaints, and dogs off leash, as well as licensing compliance. And this budget is relatively flat as well. So the proposed budget detail worksheet on page 126. We did plug in 5,000 for overtime. It is nice when we can call out our dog catcher, and he does receive overtime when we have a problem dog and the officers are busy taking care of other things. I take note that since I've been sitting here tonight, they've been to at least 6 calls and made 3 custody arrests in the field. So they're out there doing business, and being tied up with a lost stray dog is not money well spent for us. And then our contract. So this is an interesting and a notable point with Home at Last has transitioned to Columbia Gorge Animal Humane Society. Thank you. I had animal on the brain. And the cost of that contract is going up to $3,600 a month. So our line item for the dog pound, if you will, has gone to $43,200. And we also adjusted and amended our approach within the contract. Rather than paying on a certain number of dogs per month with the sliding total, and what's it mean if a dog's only in there for 15 minutes and now they're out? We have 4 kennels. There are 4 kennels. If they're full, we don't have a kennel. If they're not, we can go lodge a dog. So it's going to eliminate and relieve some of that administrative oversight that's been hitting myself as all the way up to city manager, addressing disagreements on what the contract meant. So this should be a cleaner approach to it. And for that amount of money, we want our availability on there. I'm kind of have it. So very good working relationship with Columbia Gorge Humane Society. And I'm optimistic the direction that this program is running. So for animal control, total budget, $173,734. You'll note that in the last budget cycle, we bought a new animal control vehicle. I hope some of you have seen it out around town. It's been serving the department and the community well. On animal control.
I'm missing the somehow I'm missing how the total is proposed is going down.
That's probably vehicle related.
Right.
Where we spent, I think it was 30 plus 35,000 or something on a new truck.
Thank you very much.
Well, all in.
I've heard and seen good things from, well, police codes and animal control, but specifically animal control in this case. And anybody who reads the newspaper can probably come to the conclusion that we need the full-time, I'm glad we have the full-time
Necessary
officer. We need at least that. No.
And you can just glance at Facebook and see all of the pictures of dogs lost in the city. And then question for the city manager, capital projects.
You're
Yes, you can go
Okay.
ahead.
All right, so if everybody
right.
switches to page 218, capital projects is where we put some of our larger initiatives in there for, remodels or whatever we need to do. So if you go from 218 and skip over to 221, your capital outlay, capital projects fund, we are going to click on about 4 lines down. It says paint upstairs at the police department and add additional office space. We had some underutilized space upstairs in the police department, and with just the internal building of one wall. We were able to secure 4 new desk spaces. And then we also had a need to create a space for nursing mothers within the department. And so we now have a private space for that as well. It's to give them the dignity and the respect, to give them a space to go nurse and take care of their infant children is the right thing to do, and we're required to do it. So we found a spot, and with a very minor modification upstairs, we've included that as well. For the desk space that we're putting in upstairs, we really just need power and network. There are windows, there's lights installed and everything already. So that's a good value add for us for $15,000 all in. I'm amazed that the city put that together for such an affordable price. We have a HVAC unit replacement at the PD for $13,000. Heating and air conditioning in the city, as you all probably well know, works hard to keep us warm and cool. So we want to have money available for either repairs or replacement if we need to. And then there's $130,000. That's a large number there for a generator at the police department. The police department right now is on city power, and it has limited circuits that are fed by the generator elsewhere. This money would both procure and install a generator at the police department, which will add to our resiliency in time of disaster or bad weather. If the grid is down for whatever reason, be it attack or weather related or you name it. So it's an important project, and 130,000 will both procure it as well as get it pumped in. Yes, sir.
Where would that be located then?
We're going to build a you can call it hut or a cinder block room for it in the back behind the garage.
Understood. Okay.
And it'll be vented outside and contained in the PD. We won't have to worry about it getting stolen. And then there's also a notation on there for it's a security system for City Hall, Public Works, and Library. That is access control. As you might imagine, there's places within the police department where people should be, and there's places where people should not be, and different people at different ranks can be in different places. Most notably, probably our evidence locker, which has to have the highest level of security, obviously, and really very limited access. Right now, we're on physical keys, like a key, get in with an access control system, which is really should be in place citywide. We'll have far better accountability on comings and goings, as well as the ability to quickly turn off a key if it's lost or stolen. So that's an important project going forward too. We have a small remodel at our kitchen as well. The officers do occasionally get a break. And in doing so, sometimes it's the middle of the night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And if they like to have some nutrition, our break room needs to be remodeled. And so for a small fee of $15,000 is loaded in there. It just needs to be cleaned up, and a couple of new appliances put in. So the officers have a place to. That's it for my capital projects. Any questions?
Questions? All right. Oh, yes, I see.
Quick question. I was surprised to see the numbers so low for this. And apologies for going so far back in the presentation, but radio equipment, batteries, things like that going bad. And I'm very familiar with obsolescence of some of the Motorola equipment that's been out and about over time. Is that, you mentioned that some of that was done through ARPA funds and things like that. Is there more? I suspect there's probably more coming from ARPA funds that's handling that.
There is, yes, sir. And a little backstory on that. We set forth to analyze our radio system to seek to understand if a digital upgrade was in order. Right now, we still run analog symbol system. And in doing so, it means that everybody in scanner world can hear us in real time. And it is a bit of an issue when we're coming to a call and they're headed out the back door because they already know we're coming. Additionally, when people are running for us and fleeing, we've had people roll in and pick them up and take them out of the perimeter zone because they can hear us or they've made a call. So that analysis revealed that to digitize our system and connect it to Wasco County's Harris Core. Mind you, these are Motorola radios, was in excess of 200,000.
Sure.
And I couldn't be 100% sure that it wasn't going to degrade our system. Because it was going to be an encryption, a decryption, a recryption, and that was a lot of movement for a system. Now that can be done, but I couldn't be 100% sure because we have a good radio system right now, and I did not want to mess it up by tinkering. So ARPA funds are going to help us tune our current system. We're going to seek to replace a copper line that runs to our trunking system at here in the city.
Yeah.
With a fiber line, which should help add capacity and speed communications to Wasco County Central. And then we have purchased batteries as well as these little earpieces so I can continue to monitor what's happening in the field while I'm here talking to you today or at any other, or when our officers are in court, they can also monitor because there's so few of us that if one happens, they need to go and they need to get.
Awesome. Thanks.
Questions?
I have a couple.
Yes,
Chairman.
Councilor Richardson.
Chief, can you discuss, just for the good of the order, the level of staffing that we have on the budget compared to where we want to be?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. So ideally, we would be fully staffed with the positions that we have already been allocated, and we are not. We have positions to employ still with a vacancy that exists and a vacancy that will exist on Friday, sadly.
Yeah.
We also have the watershed enforcement patrol position that we need to both fill and recruit for and fill. And then if you recall, the city council approved an overfill position so we can kind of get ahead of this curve of vacancies. And the city manager and I have both agreed that if we can get to the point where we're full, absent the overfill, we'll stop on that precipice and look over, take a read of the land and decide whether we need to fill that or not. If a great candidate walks in the door, who's a lateral or an experienced person, then maybe it's worth it to pull the trigger on that. And then if we're just looking at candidates that are marginal or less desirable, maybe we will not. So we're 3 down, just straight up. We have 2 in the academy. We have 3 out on maternity leave and 1 on an injury leave. So when you start picking off people who aren't actually available for patrol, we get down very quickly. Those people exist. They just need to resolve and work and hire the others.
And we are actually considerably better off than we were a couple of years ago.
I would say that that's an accurate representation.
We were at 24 FTE 2 years ago, and now we're at 29 with ongoing staffing challenges, but we're
26 sworn.
Yeah.
And then we do have, of course, evidence tech, dog catcher codes, 2 secretaries or administrative assistants. So with those, that brings us up to that total number. We're 26.
Yeah. Thank you. One other, I just noticed in this line on page 122 under code enforcement, under contractual services, other contractual services, youth services work crew, graffiti abatement, hooray. For discussion, do we need to discuss that? Or are we good?
I think we can handle that within the department. There's some discussion about if the city can attain better value for money by using a different contractor for that. And then let well, it's not only youth services, but they're doing public service, court ordered public service. Yeah, community service. That's the term. So there's, because of some limitations that juveniles have and not being able to paint high or climb a ladder.
Sure.
Or use some of the equipment, we'd like to see a better product at a better price, and I think it's attainable. So we can handle that.
Thanks.
I may also add that there are some impacts, again, still being felt from COVID-19 when it comes to diversion and the hours that were being served. And so we've engaged with some of our Wasco County counterparts to discuss how that returns and what's best for both partners in service delivery. So there's a couple different aspects to that conversation.
Thank you.
It appears this completes our police input in this budget process. Is there anything else we Want to circle back on? Thank you. We, right now, we have about 7 minutes. Can we accomplish the technology? Is that next?
Good evening. I'm David Collins. I'm the IT director here for the city. I'll be going through the technology budget for that. As mentioned before, this is a newly created department, as well as an increasing staff as well. That you'll see some of the additional costs. We're currently at 3 full-time employees right now. Myself, systems administrator, and an IT specialist as well. And we will start on page 129 for the budget there. So, as I mentioned, the large increase was mostly due to the increase of staffing, as well as the change from IT manager position for myself to the director. Other pieces on here to note as well, some of the changes here in contractual services that we've had. Previously we had a little bit larger in the contractual services, a little bit less now. Previously there were some website redesigns and changes in the past, as well as some IT security auditing that was done as I started here. One other item to note as well, under software maintenance, we are seeing some increases. Just overall with software prices, hardware prices, just sort of seeing that. Anything else I wanted to mention as well? I think that was the most. Is there any specific questions that I can go through or answer on some of these?
One thing, if I may, before questions to highlight is you'll see under other contractual services, line item 39-000. There's a cybersecurity insurance policy. Last year in the fiscal year 23-24 budget, that wasn't included, but it was added later. And so there's not a dip in that trend line for that line item. Just wanted to. You'll see 24,922 and then 4630 in fiscal year 23-24. So that trend line is where it should be with that cybersecurity purchase.
And then the other question, one of the questions that I was thinking about was in the computer software, it looks like you guys have moved to virtualization of 4 servers. And
Yes.
as well as like
we currently have 3 servers. We're looking at expanding that to 4 next year.
Okay. City Wi-Fi. I know it was initially put in and paid for by Google, and it was a grant, and somehow it fell through the cracks. No one was maintaining it. And it ran into some difficulty. Do you have any updates on where we stand with the Wi-Fi system?
Yes, we'll speak about it a little bit more in detail later. But our Rare volunteer has been actively working on that, and we have an RFP out that we'll be bringing back to City Council, and there is a budget allocation to address that system. We'll get into it a little bit later in the presentation.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Right. Any other questions for technology? Coming up on the bottom of the hour, and it looks like there's a natural break here. Under general services, do you want to continue on, Matthew, or what's your recommendation?
We got. Okay, so turning to page 135, and Daniel, why don't you come on up? This is the general services department. There's a couple different individuals who are involved in this. With the staffing challenges that we've had in the community development department, Daniel is assisting in this area and providing support to our new facilities supervisor. So I just take it bit by bit. Out of the gate, a couple of the different items to highlight, again, would be the gray line items that were included in the additional handouts that you were given. And actually, Daniel, would you like to take point on the gray items there?
Yeah, so the gray items, firstly, the parking lots. So the general services maintains all city property. That includes parking lots. And so this includes restriping, crack sealing, sealing, that sort of thing. And so the parking lots changed from the previous budget allocation. It went up by $900, and that is for crack sealing and restriping City Hall parking lot behind City Hall, in addition to placing a new handicap parking space heated applique. The current one's breaking apart. That's parking lots, and then shop equipment. Believe that one is where I requested $2,000 be added to the previous budget amount, and that is because I became aware the staff in general services have been using their own personal tools to do city work, and I don't think they should need to. I think the city is capable of purchasing tools for them to use in their employment, and why I added $2,000 to that budget line. And on page 136, property insurance, just a minor change on that, and it's just based on projected increases for property insurance. The increase based on last year's actuals went from 35,000 to 35,500. So I just added 5,000 or 500 to that line item. And then vehicles. So last year we added a facility supervisor position. That facility supervisor started off using a pickup that was seized by the police department. That was frankly a piece of junk. It's falling apart. I don't want to say too much bad stuff about it because it's going to be going to auction. The city manager approved earlier this year for general services to purchase a pickup for that supervisor to drive for their work. So that decreased the line item in the current budget, which was intended to purchase a Bobcat. The current Bobcat's 40 years old and has an open cab. So general services employees, when they're out plowing and plowing snow in the wintertime, particularly parking lots, sidewalks, they're running around in a steel cage in the cold weather, plowing snow. And it gets quite cold if you've ever sat in a steel cage when it's cold out. That on top of it being 40 years old, it needs to be replaced. And so I've added that funding back into coming year's budget. In addition, we've been presented with the unique opportunity with the remaining budget funds in the current budget to replace a vehicle that was due to be replaced in 26, 27, and that was on the capital expenditures breakdown that you saw earlier in the budget presentation. Rather than replacing the transmission in that truck and putting new tires on it just to get rid of it in 26, 27, we've been presented with a pretty good deal on a new truck, trade the current one in on it, pending council's approval to surplus that vehicle. So the remaining funds in the current budget would then purchase that vehicle with the trade-in. And so the 26, 27 purchase would not take place. It's going to get pushed out a few years. And so the other truck slated to be purchased next year is the 1-ton dump bed truck. And that was already in the budget.
Page 135, Getchell Building, $10,000. What is that for? Do you see it?
That is for electricity and miscellaneous maintenance. So
We didn't have electricity in the previous years?
For the lights?
It's the new one.
Oh, there's a HVAC
Oh, there's
system
an
in there
HVAC
circulated
system in
there.
there.
I think I can answer that question.
Sure.
So this year's budget in the general services, we did make a few changes where we've added some line items.
I
And
understand.
so in those line items, you'll see that there is nothing in the history of those.
Right.
For example, the parking lots, the park maintenance. Historically, if you look back, those were all in the park and dock maintenance above the 4311. And so those items have been separated out so you can keep a little more, you can kind of see exactly what is going in the Gitchell building for expenses.
When I see things like that, it triggers a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Right, done. Now we have a decision. Well, one more. Yes, one more.
Any other questions? Thank you.
You bet. One more. Yeah, he requested one more topic.
So the last piece of the general fund budget would be the general fund other uses. If you turn to page 139, that will give us the breakdown of the other uses. Northwest County Parks and Rec, that is part of the TRT dollars. We give them 25%, which is 2% of the 8%. So we budget for that. This year in tourism, the chamber is requesting 452,313 for their budget. And Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue, we have been budgeting to give this annually, and this will continue for 13 more years at 90,000. The debt service is our leases, and that's part of the GASB 87 rule. And so we have to put those as other debt. Street funds, we are budgeting to give 550,000 for our goal as a city to provide additional funds for the street fund, and 200,000 for an additional transfer for the ADA transition plan. The unemployment fund, a couple of years back, we changed that the unemployment fund that we actually each department or fund that usually uses the unemployment will reimburse in the next fiscal year. And so this year we do have a little bit of transfers to replenish that fund. The special grant fund, we have a transfer for the SHPO grant for $34.95. And our capital project fund, as Matthew mentioned earlier, we have 385,000 of projects that we're trying to do in the capital project fund. Right now, we'd like to go ahead and sustain the amount in that fund. And so we're going to transfer out $385,000 for projects that are currently budgeted in that area. And then to the airport fund, this is something that the city and Clickitat County mutually transfer in 65,000 each to the airport fund for their projects that they do or for their overhead expenses. And then we are wanting to maintain our 10% contingency. With the changes that we made in the gray earlier, that does change our contingency because we like to withhold a 10% contingency amount. So our contingency would be $1,143,173. And it would be changing our unappropriated from what it previously was, because we would have to use some of those monies for some of the projects that we added in for general services, city council, et cetera. And that would leave us with $1,173,000. The unappropriated fund balance leaves us with $1,173,606, and the reserve for future expenditures at $608,070. Is there any questions regarding the fund? Yeah, the general fund at all, I guess, since we're at the end.
Do you have a question?
Sure. Lots of questions. Andy, just for, again, the good of the order, explain what reserve for future expenditures means.
Reserve for future expenditures is Basically, it is account that we are reserving money for future projects that we haven't quite yet identified.
And can you speak to a minute for a moment, sorry, on the why we're paying the Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue debt for another 13 years? What is that paying off?
Certainly, I can take that question. So there are, and this is further detailed in the opening of the budget when it details the enterprise zone payments and agreements for certain contributions. For Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue, specifically, these revolve around the fire tower, that training tower that they have there, along with a volunteer firefighting program. And so those payments have actually been going on for actually a few more. I think it started in fiscal year 16, 17, and the other one was 17, 18. And so those are tied to the annual payments that we receive from one of the enterprise zone agreements. Should those payments end, or when those payments end, I believe those transfers to Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue will as well.
One more question. This will be my last one, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time, but I'm curious if you were to move 25,000 from the reserve for future expenditures into the safe space, leaving us at about 580 instead of 608. Do you feel like we could live with that? Would that imperil us in some way that I don't understand?
No, that would not. And that is definitely something that we could do.
Something that we can discuss tomorrow night?
Yeah.
Right? Do you have any other recommendations? What is your desire? Do we have anything else we could cover in tonight's?
I think this is a natural stopping point.
I do too.
We've completed the general fund. We'll have additional presentations from Airport, Public Works, and a few other funds. But this is a great stopping point, especially as we get close
Works.
to.
I'm planning on bringing a shock collar for our director, and I can push the button from here, activate him. All right. With that said, is there anything else for the good of the order? Then we will halt tonight's proceedings and take it up again tomorrow night, 5:30, same place. And we will conclude hopefully tomorrow night our budget process.
Thank you very much.
Bring it.
I mean, our Wednesday.